What's up, everybody? Thank you so much for joining us on this special panel episode on Portland's new voting system. We covered a lot in this episode. We mainly focused on single-transferable vote and the whole new ranked choice voting system, but we got into a lot of kind of adjacent topics, so I'm glad you're here to educate yourself, as people, I think, really need that before this November election. I just wanted to mention a couple things in this episode because we ran out of time with these two gentlemen who I was so glad were able to join us. And I would have asked these questions if I had time. I just wanted to mention them before we all got in this episode. First of all, I really wanted to ask about recounts. I've got a lot of questions on the show and off the show about how recounts will work under this new system, and I did not get to ask that. I did get to ask a specific question that I got about a recall process that could be sort of a workaround for candidates. So that's near the end of the episode if you're looking for that. Another thing I wanted to ask about, later in this episode, you'll hear we start talking about RC Tab, which is the open source software that the county is using to integrate the ranked choice voting aspect of ballots and tabulation. I really wanted to ask Tim Scott if there was any money being transferred to the company that provides RC Tab, which I believe is called the Ranked Choice Voting Center. It is a nonprofit, which is kind of funny, you'll hear in this episode. I often describe nonprofits as a bad thing, because in my view, for the most part, they are in Portland. Tim kind of tries to portray them as a good thing, that it's a nonprofit. I just really wanted to ask if there was any money being transferred to that nonprofit. So Tim, I doubt you're going to be popping off in the comments here, but if you are, comment below. I would love to hear that. The last thing I wanted to mention before we get started with this episode is that we talked before recording on this episode and a little bit during recording, but I and Kristen, I think both were still not really moved as far as how much data we have for cities that use single transferable vote. In other words, multi-member districts with ranked choice voting with this specific system. Before recording and during, we got the same examples that we've always heard, at least on my show, which is Cambridge, Massachusetts is the one city that everyone points to in the US that has this system, which is a little different from Portland to begin with. But outside of that, then we start getting examples of Australia, Malta, Ireland, those type of things. And personally, I'm just not satisfied with those. I think different countries have such a different strata of factors that it's not really comparable. So I walked away, and I still feel like we don't have sufficient data from other cities to compare to and learn from as we implement this new system here, when we have to start pointing to countries that are 1,000 miles away and oceans away from where we are. With that, I hope you enjoyed this special episode. It is long, but if you are here to learn, I'm glad you're here to learn, because we need people to learn about this new system and get more people to turn out to vote this November. I'm so happy today to have a couple folks from our local government employees here. We got City and County, James Eccles. Did I say that right?
You did.
And Tim Scott. Thanks for coming here. We're here to talk about our kind of new election system here. I've been branding this as a single transferable vote kind of special, and we've just been talking a little even before we recorded here about it, and I'm learning a lot already. So, and Kristen,
thank you.
Thanks for co-hosting as usual.
Thanks, Andy.
Check out Kristen's podcast, Rational in Portland, if you haven't. But yeah, I wanted to get started just having each of you guys kind of explain your roles right now and what you're doing.
You want to start?
Sure, I'm happy to start. So James Eccles, I work in the city auditor's office. Specifically, I'm in the elections division. My title is elections analyst, and I've been working there since the charter amendments happened. So the beginning of 2023, I started. My main role is voter education lead. So I go out and do things like this to talk about how the election is going to work, make sure that people are comfortable in filling out their ballot, and they know what's going to happen with their vote, and they know what to do to make sure their intention passes. That's really my main role. Our office, the voter education office, has been expanding. We added campaign finance a few years back. We've added, we've expanded our lobbying role, other things. So the office has been expanding. We're up to 4 people. We're going to be going up to 5 people soon.
What's the lobbying role?
So our office regulates lobbying for the city officials. So there's lobbying regulations under city code, and we're the ones that help to implement that and then regulate it and conduct investigations if necessary. Yeah, there's a lot. That's why the office is expanding. So yeah, so we have an elections manager and then 4 people that work under her. Deborah Scroggin is our elections manager. And so we handle anything at the city level. We sort of own the elections code at the city level, which is what mandates what the single transferable vote and the ranked choice voting that we're going to talk about today. And that's what the office does. My main role is just voter education.
Nice.
Yeah, and I'm Tim Scott. I'm the director for the elections division at Multnomah County, and our office conducts elections. So, um, for this city election coming up, like I think it's helpful to understand that city candidates file with the city elections office, and so they've been very busy. How many
There's like
total
100, right?
candidates?
Or
Oh my
something?
Yeah,
gosh.
120 is what we ended with, or
Right.
116, I think is the
Wow.
exact number. But yeah, we finalized yesterday at like
City council
4:30.
candidates.
No, just citywide candidates. That counts
Citywide.
mayor and auditor and city council.
Okay.
And so where their job ends, well, and their job doesn't end there, but as far as like getting ready for the election, yesterday was the deadline for them, the cities, all of the cities in Multnomah County to certify the list of candidates that had qualified to the ballot. And so that's kind of where we pick up. And so right now, my office is working at building the ballots, entering all those candidate names into our software,
Wow.
programming the election, making sure all the rules are in place for both the regular first past the post contests, because the state certified its candidates to us yesterday as well. And so we're building the ballots right now. We'll be working on that through the weekend. And then starting on Monday, we'll be proofing, lots of proofing to make sure that the ballots are accurate before they get mailed to voters. And the first group of ballots that gets mailed to voters happens 45 days before the election, which is September 20th
Okay.
for
I
this
was going to ask
election.
about, yeah.
And that's the military and overseas ballots. Those get mailed all over the world, depending on where U.S. citizens are living abroad that have a home base in Multnomah County. And then the regular ballots go out 20 days before the election. I don't have the date off the top of my head.
It'd be like
Um,
early October or
Yeah,
something.
it will be like the second week of October, I think,
Okay.
for the November 5th election. And then voters have, depending on where they are and when they get their ballot, usually about 20 days for domestic voters. They have to vote their ballot, choose who they want to vote for, do their research, get educated about the candidates, mark their ballots, and then return them to us. And they have until 8 o'clock on election night to drop that ballot in a Dropbox, or they can choose to mail it back, and they just have to get it postmarked by election day, and then it has to be received by us 7 days after the election.
Yeah.
So, um, our office is responsible for administering the elections. Kind of after all, we get all the data that we need to conduct the election from all the jurisdictions that are involved.
Yeah. And I know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I worked for the TV news here for like 10 years, and you've been doing this a long time, right? In Multnomah County?
I have.
Yeah.
This is my 16th year with
Okay.
Multnomah County. I've been in election administration for 22 years now. I started my career in Virginia. I got curious after the Florida 2000 election, wanted to know more about how the
Hanging
behind the
chads.
scenes,
Yeah.
how
And
the behind the scenes.
for younger people, it was a highly contested
Yeah,
state.
Supreme Court
Yeah.
ended up.
Yeah.
Correct. Yes,
Huge.
the results were contested, but to me, it was more about kind of why did it seem like in the United States we were having some trouble
Yeah.
with kind of defining how we counted ballots, and so that piqued my interest. I volunteered in election office, was an intern while I was in college, and then just kind of worked my way up and ended up coming home where I grew up to Portland, Oregon, and working for Multnomah County elections.
Nice. And I'm sure you get this all the time, but people confuse you with the senator.
Do they really?
Not visually.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Like I
Because
just
he's
mention your
black,
name
yes.
sometimes, and people are like, who is that? Yeah.
We are
Tim
very
Scott.
different people. I
Right,
can
right.
assure you of that. Before Senator Tim Scott was in his role in North Carolina or South Carolina, I think, there was a famous conductor with the Oregon Symphony named Tim Scott, or a famous
Okay.
musician. And so if you Googled it, sometimes you got hits for both. But yes, I'm the Multnomah County Elections Director.
Okay. Yeah, I like all the ballot stuff you're saying, and I was just thinking, so the mail-in and all that stuff is obviously kind of the same old style. The ballot itself will be a whole different thing, but before we get into that, I was just going to have each of you kind of explain because I've been talking to a lot of people this past few months, and there's a lot of people who don't know not only what district they live in, but there's just like some of the candidates I've had on here say that about 50% of people are even aware of this new system. So I was going to just have each of you guys kind of explain. I know we were just talking about this, and you've probably done this a million times, but just to an uninformed voter who's just like, "There's a new thing, like what's going on?" And I know that's hard to sum up in
Do
a
you
quick
want to
thing, but
start with kind of the districts and how people can find them, and then
Sure.
we can talk about voter education
yeah,
together?
I know
Yeah,
the city
yeah.
has a lot of tools to
Yeah,
check this stuff
absolutely. So
out.
yeah, I'm happy to say it lots and lots of times. I've been prompted to. Portland.gov/vote is our new this election cycle site for voter education, and it's got anything we talk about today. It'll go into more detail there and have lots of ways to learn. We know that people learn in different ways, so we're really trying to. There's videos and interactive tools to actually go through an election and all those things. So that's all there. Anything I talk about today, please go check that out. So there are three basic things that came out of the charter that we're changing. We're not going to talk a ton today about the governance change, but it is relevant to the rest. So switching from a commission form of government to a council mayor form of government. This is a change that really kind of brings us in line with most other. I think there's one
Right.
other major city in the United States that didn't have this form of government. So we're really kind of just catching up to the rest of the country in that way.
And that's the bureau kind of
Right. Yeah. So
piece of
right
it.
now,
Yeah.
well, previously, all of the bureaus would be under commissioners that sat on city council. So they were both a legislative body and administrative body. Now they're going to be a purely legislative body, and then the mayor and with the city administrator that they bring on will be sort of the executive branch, if you will, that will be the administrative body that controls all the bureaus and does the day to day. And all of those, there's still obviously interchange and checks and balances there. When someone is appointed, they still need to be confirmed, and for a number of these high level positions, city council will still have the ability to fire with supermajority, things like that. Some of those details are still being worked out, so I encourage you to follow up, and there's still debates ongoing. City council is still figuring some of
And
these
the
things out.
transition, yeah.
Absolutely. So but even right now we have the city administrator and the interim city administrator and interim deputy city administrators are in place, so that we could we didn't want to January 1 suddenly with the new
It
form of
just
government,
flip
let's
a
figure it out,
switch,
right?
yeah.
So it's getting it in place now so that we can sort of make that bureaucratic shift to what it's going to be. And that's all something that's happening. So those, I don't think we're going to spend a lot of detail on that today, but
Yep.
it's important because it informs sort of the rest of the changes. The next change is, what Tim had mentioned with the districts. So for the first time, the city of Portland will have districts for city council. Previously, we've done, just citywide. So you would go, they were staggered years, but you would still, the entire city would vote on a single commissioner and then would represent, and then you vote on another one. So you'd end up with the four. Now there's going to be 3 city councilors elected from each of 4 districts. So we've split up the districts. It was in the charter that there would be 4 districts, but it needed to be figured out how to do this. So we brought in an independent district commission that got formed. They did a lot of studies. They did a ton of community involvement. So they had a lot of hearings where they brought in the community, said, hey, submit your idea of maps. Tell us why you think this works or doesn't work. There's some rules that they needed to follow. So roughly the population is the same in each one of those. That's why you sort of see out in District 4. District 4 is everything
Yeah.
west of the river, and then also Selwood and those.
It's the one that's split across the
Right.
river, and there's some controversy with it, and I know that's what people explained.
Right.
We wanted to balance the population.
Right. And it's just, unfortunately, it's kind of the nature of there's not enough people living west of the river to have that be its own district. So somewhere, and there were debates open and public about where that would cross over. And this is just the like any democratic decision, this is what got the majority opinion. So it crossed over in that way.
The majority of opinion from that commission, the mapping commission.
Right.
Yeah, there were commissioners on the mapping commission,
right,
and then they all vote, and then that majority decided the mapping.
Right, and they present that to city council. City council
Right.
did have an opportunity to deny it. They did not. They accepted the plan that was submitted.
Right.
But yeah, they weighed in with lots of opinions from the public and looking at maps and all these different options. So there's lots of information. They've issued their own reports. They've been since we don't need them anymore. anymore, so they don't exist, but there's still lots of their reports are out there. So I really encourage people. They had their own site on the transition team. So if you really want to dig into districts heavily, you can. On our site, on the vote
I'm
site,
sorry. So what does that mean then if what doesn't exist anymore since
the commission.
The commission,
Yeah, yeah.
But you're saying there's a website that people can go to
Right.
that contains all this information.
Right. Yeah. On the transition website, so portland.gov/transition, they have all of this information, and there's still a site for the Independent District Commission from there. And so they issued their own reports. It's all, all of that information was public. You can still find what they talked about, debated, what they decided. The official plan that the charter required them to submit a plan to our office, to the elections office for that district. So that plan is public record, the whatever they ended up with the final. And since it was accepted by city council, we proceeded with that plan. So what you right now for voters, that's all kind of the background,
Right,
the
yeah.
deep dive. But
Yeah.
right now for voters, what's important is we have on our website, on the vote website, there is a tab for districts. And when you go there, it'll give you sort of this short summary about how we got here and what they are. But it also importantly has some map tools. So if you're not sure where you are, you can see a map right there of District 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you can also put in your address and find out exactly, it'll tell you exactly what district you're in. You can zoom out, see the map, see how close you are to the border, see if your neighbors are also in the same district and all that.
Just like you can do with county commissioners.
Yes.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And we also now, as of yesterday, we have our official final list of the register of candidates is up on our website as
great.
well.
Yeah.
So, and that's broken down by its office. So mayor, District 1, District 2, District 3,
that's
District
great.
4, and auditor. So those are our final lists now. We've passed that off. Our job in that department is done for the moment. So anything that's on there, there's lots of lists for the last, half year. There have been lists floating around in all sorts of places about who is a candidate, who's not. That is the final list of who will be on the ballot. So if their name is not on that list, they're still welcome to run as a write-in candidate, but they won't be on the ballot. That's our final list, and it's done. So that's available. You can compare that to see in your district which candidates are actually running, and we really encourage people to find that tool and find out. The last thing I think that we're going to talk more about today is ranked choice voting. So that's the third sort of leg of that charter that got changed. We previously have elected all of our city officials in a citywide, city elected officials in a citywide elections. Now we will still do citywide elections for mayor and auditor, but those will be what we call single winner ranked choice voting. It's also sometimes referred to as instant runoff. That's just because you can think of it as the first round is a normal election, and then every round after that is doing a runoff election, but you're doing it instantly. So you're just doing it right there. And then
what does that mean? Instantly right there.
So think of a normal election. If lots of places, if you do an election, like think of our primary, if in our primary under the rules as they stood previously, if somebody got over that 50% margin, they'd be good. But if nobody did, we would take the top 2 people and they would go to the general, which is a runoff of the primary. Same thing in lots of places. If it's too close to call,
currently the county,
right?
That will change, is my understanding, but currently that's how it works.
Correct.
So when we vote for county commissioner in November, we'll still vote in that manner, right?
Well, we're having a runoff for 2 districts
because of the
in
we've already
Multnomah
had
County,
the primary.
because during the primary, there were 2 districts where one candidate didn't get 50%. So there's 2 separate districts that are going to get a vote again on the top 2 candidates from the primary.
Yeah.
Right.
I was going to ask this later, but is my understanding that that's the last primary in Multnomah County with that style?
So Multnomah County is moving to ranked choice voting, a very similar style of single winner ranked choice voting for all its contests in 2026. So you are correct. In May of 2026, there will be no first election.
There's no primary.
Right.
Yeah.
There's no primary for Multnomah County or the city of Portland.
Right.
And in November of 2026, both the city and the county will be using ranked choice voting.
Yeah. And in fact, the city will no longer have any elections outside of the general election for candidates.
Because you'll
still see measures. Right. Everyone will be in this one election. That's the election that has the highest turnout. It has more than double the turnout usually of the primary. So
it's a good way to get people to vote.
Right. Bring them all into one election. And sort of to finally wrap up the answer to your question, you can sort of think of people will often refer to that first round of a ranked choice voting election. So whoever you ranked the highest, that's sort of as an election. And then the round after that is what would happen in a runoff if you would sort of pre-select it. So you already said, look, if nobody gets high enough, I think my second rank is this, my third rank is that. So we just go straight to it. We do it instantly because it happens. The tabulation
see.
all happens right there. We take all the votes immediately. The county takes all the votes immediately and puts them in, and it's instantly tabulated. So that's why we refer to it that
As
way.
opposed to a primary.
As opposed to doing a primary and then
Yes,
a general
and then
was
a general,
runoff
right.
several months later. Right.
I'm glad. Yeah, I was gonna say I'm glad you answered that because, and I'm still a little confused about it. But I heard from a couple different people that this single transferable vote is not an instant runoff system. But you're saying it is.
Well, I'm saying the single winner form is often referred to as instant runoff. I don't often hear the other form referred to as instant runoff. I mean, technically, it's doing the same thing with slightly different rules. You know, we have the rules that we're going to talk about with surplus votes,
Yeah,
and you have to end up with 3 winners, not 1. So the rules are a little bit different, but it is still doing the same effective thing. You don't need an extra election because
Right.
you're doing it all right there.
The kind of bigger point is to not have a primary.
Right, or special elections.
Yeah.
And the other piece of that is voters are marking their ballots exactly the same way for both single winner and multi-winner. So to put it in the terms that we've been talking about, they are expressing their preference for in their second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth choices. If my first choice doesn't get elected, who's my second choice?
So by
So they are
single.
expressing their intent for if this is my favorite person, this is who I want to win. But if they don't, this is my second place choice. So
I've been
voters
thinking
are,
of it as a backup, like
well,
a
I
backup
mean,
vote. If
you could think of it that way. But the important thing to understand is whether it's single winner or multi-winner.
yeah,
And those are the terms that we use to talk about them because most voters understand it better when we say single and multi.
Single would be mayor.
Single would
Mayor
be
and
mayor and auditor,
Yeah.
and multi-winner would be council. And
and the
voters-
future county candidates, right?
we're
Would be
not
single.
we're not using single transferable vote in Multnomah County and because we only have single winner.
Right.
That's
we only
another
have
single winner.
Yeah, we only have a single representative for each district.
Right.
Yeah, there's no do you call it multi-member districts? Is that the correct term for?
Yeah.
We do, for the city, yes.
Yes.
For
Yes,
city
for the
council, they're
city.
multi-member
city,
districts,
right.
3-member districts.
Right.
Yeah.
The Multnomah County Commission number will stay the same.
Yeah.
Correct.
That means there's one commissioner per district.
And there was it's important to understand that all of these changes go back to charter commissions that were
Yes.
impaneled in both the city
Right.
and the county at the same time. This is the first time in the history of the charter commissions of both jurisdictions that they happened at the same time.
Wow.
Huh.
So on the same timeline, the county, our charter commission meets every 6 years, and the cities meets at least every 10 years. And this is the first time they've ever aligned. So the charter commissions were taking place at the same time. And I know because I had some interaction with folks who were working with the charter commission in the county that they also considered similar questions. Do we want multi-member districts? Is this something that we should put forward to voters? And that's the other big piece to understand is that these changes that both the city and the county made were based on a vote of the people. It's only the ideas that were put forward in the form of ballot measures
Yeah.
to voters
It's like a
that
ballot measure,
the
like any other
commission
ballot measure.
exactly. It's just an idea for a change. And it was voters who expressed their intent that yes, we in the city's instance, we want to change our form of government and we want ranked choice voting. And in the county's instance, all of our ideas were broken up into, I think, 7 different measures that had subjects as diverse as ranked choice voting or changes to the auditor's office, things like that. So all of that was decided in November of 2022 based on those measures.
And yeah, I was just trying to follow that. So that, are you saying that the county did split all those decisions up into, you said 7 different components?
Correct.
Because I know obviously the city, that was like kind of a
City did.
package deal.
Yeah.
And I know you guys probably don't want to comment on this, but I've heard from a lot of people that their public comments were suppressed in that process with the city stuff. But I also was going to say that I know you guys are just here to implement what we
That's
voted
correct,
on. You
yeah.
know,
And
we're
that
not.
was what you were trying
We
to
just
explain.
follow the-
is
we just
that,
follow
look,
the rules.
Y'all
Yeah.
voted for
I just wanted
this.
to-
We're not trying to tell you one system is better or worse.
Yeah.
Or this is,
And I didn't want- I
we're
just
not
wanted to
at
say
This
this.
that
is not
for,
coming from Tim Scott's fiefdom.
yeah, right.
This is not good, bad, or
Yeah.
otherwise in
It
our
just
opinion.
is.
Right.
It's-
It just
it
is.
And I wanted to
Yeah.
say that for viewers or listeners too, who might think that like you two are just like deciding for everybody. Like
No.
You are doing what the people voted for. So,
Right.
you know, we all
Right. In
understand that.
4, 6, 8 years, if they decide they want to change the system again, then I will be just as deliberate and intentional and excited about implementing that. Because really all I care about is that I want all the voters to understand what the system is, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So if we change the system again, then I'll throw myself at making sure everybody understands how to vote in that system.
And
But-
I don't want to like raise your blood pressure or give you a stroke here, but theoretically, could there be a ballot measure at any time? I mean, I know for the city you said at least every 10 years, but could theoretically there be a ballot measure next cycle that says, hey, we're going to get rid of single transferable vote, let's say.
Right.
At any time,
Yeah.
anyone can conduct an initiative petition.
Right.
to-
Get the signatures, I guess is what they'd have to do.
Correct.
Yeah. This passed through the Charter Commission.
Yes.
There's sort of 3 ways you can get a ballot measure.
Can you
but-
talk to us about that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so there are city referred measures, are measures that city council comes and says, we think there needs to be a change, but we think this is a change to the charter. The charter is our constitution of the city, effectively. So this is a change that's too big for us to sort of decide in this room between us that this is going to happen. So they refer it to the ballot. The elections office, does some of the work administratively to pass it off to the county. It gets put on the ballot and people vote for it as a measure. The next way is this is what happened with these changes that we're talking about today, and that's at least every 10 years the Charter Commission will meet. It's members of the public that are appointed by the mayor and city council. They come together, they have lots of debates, they talk about, and then they propose a number of things. They didn't only propose this. There's some other things that are going to be on this November ballot that are related to other questions that they also felt were worth being put forward. So they sort of have this power to, if they have a majority decide, they can vote on it. So there are some things that they talked about, but they didn't get to a majority decision that didn't go on the ballot. The third way is an initiative. So it's from an individual or a group or whatever just decides to go. And the number of signatures that's required is based on how many people voted, or actually it's the number of people that voted in the governor's race in the primary before they submitted those numbers. So it's a little
A
complicated.
percentage.
A percentage, yeah.
Yeah.
So it's about 40,000 or so right now is about what would be required for a measure in the city of Portland. And if
Those
they
have to be certified, of course. Signatures.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
so
Yeah.
that's-
Yeah, they go out,
It's difficult,
they
yeah.
independently, they having nothing to do with us, they
Right.
collect all the signatures, they bring them in, and then we work with the county to make sure that, go
The
through the
rules are
process of
followed, yeah.
verifying that these are filled out properly, correctly, these signatures are real signatures, we go through all that process. So that's sort of the third way, and that can happen if we're past the deadline for this cycle. There's always July 5th was the sort of, you had to have things in by, because we have to have time to check those. It takes a lot of time to check 50,000 signatures. So that all takes a process. But certainly for the 2026 general election, someone could put something on the ballot for that and they'd have to get it in by July 5th or I don't know what the date is off the top of my head, but sometime,
council could refer it. Council could create, with y'all's help, as long as they're following the rules, a ballot measure. They could,
Right.
but because it changes the charter, they don't just get to legislate it. People have to vote on it.
You nailed it when you
Right.
said referral. It's called a referral.
Yeah.
It's when the legislative body takes an action to move a question forward to the voters.
Right.
And I do want to say, like, with our help, it means only administrative. Like,
Yes.
we
Thank you.
are very much independent of the process of
Sure.
creating. Like,
Yeah, you're
it is-
saying you're not part of policy.
right.
You
We don't
wait for it
write
to
what the
show
ballot
up.
measure will be. We are legally not allowed to write the measure.
Right, because
as
you
it
have
is
to
written.
remain separate.
Right, exactly. We just check to make sure they've checked all the boxes appropriately. They've done what they needed, and then we say, great, this can go on the ballot, and then we put it on the ballot.
And you're part of, did you say you're part of the auditor's office?
Right.
And so, as you said, that's part of how this is bifurcated. It remains separate.
Exactly. Yeah.
It's not a policy making body. They're looking at
Exactly.
rules and regulations and whether things were followed as written out.
Exactly. Absolutely.
And what James has described happens the same way in Multnomah County. There's three ways that
Right. Okay.
a charter change can happen, but they all go to a vote of the people. And I think it's also really interesting to note because Gresham also had a charter commission working around the same time,
Hmm.
and they were exploring similar questions as well. I think two of those charter changes will be on the ballot this November for City of Gresham residents. So, so this could be happening in lots of jurisdictions around the state. It's just that, this is kind of the first time that the city and the county were happening at the same time, and they ended up deciding a similar policy question as related to ranked choice voting.
Yeah, and the charter that passed in the city, it specifically gave a deadline of by the 2024 election. So that set our deadline. We didn't choose that. So we started working right away.
Right.
The
you
county
had
had a
to.
little more leeway and we're able to wait a couple extra years.
Right.
So
Ours said no later than 2026. And based on both of the measures passing, we chose to implement the city and then implement the county.
learn from all of our mistakes, figure out what we did wrong.
I
and do
didn't
it
say
better.
that. I didn't say that. But we are simultaneously preparing for ranked choice voting in the
Right.
county while we are working with the city. I think, there's so much work that has had to be done in the last
Mm-hmm.
20 months to
Sort of
get us
mind-boggling, honest. I mean,
to
you
this
would know
point.
better.
I
But
was gonna ask you, is this like, because like I mentioned, you've been doing this a long time in Multnomah County. Is this like your biggest project? I mean, it just seems like a monumental.
I mean,
Yeah, it does.
I've been around for a lot of different big changes.
Yeah.
That's the thing is, you know, some people would come to me and say, "Is this going to be the hardest thing you've ever done?" And I would say, "No,
Hmm.
it won't be the hardest thing I ever do, but it's going to take a lot of work." And that's the way we approach all changes to state law, whether it's automatic voter registration or going back even farther, vote by mail. That was a big change for Oregon
Sure.
to implement. I was not in Oregon at the time of that change, but even online voter registration was a huge
Sure.
change to the way Oregon elections worked. And my office and other election offices around the state, it's our responsibility to implement that regardless of what the change is.
I have kind of a weird question. Maybe I think maybe you might be better to answer it, but whoever wants to answer this. I get a lot of questions about with these multi-member districts, and I've said it many times on there. I'm in District 3 here. Let's say I have my 3 city councilors. If I have an issue with something going on in the city, I get asked this all the time. Do you have a recommendation of which person I go to bring my concern to?
Yeah. So for one, I want to really stress that is a question that is still being actively debated by the city. So I really encourage you that there are
City council is debating
city
that.
council, the transition team, there are commissions. We have a GTAC is our government transition advisory committee.
Okay.
So they're a commission that's appointed just sort of like the independent district commission to advise us on the changes. They work with the public all the time to kind of see how the public feels about it. They go out and do education with groups in the public and do speaking. So they're working on it as well. And there's a lot of opportunities for people they've done some town halls where the whole purpose of the town hall was, how do you want to interact with your city council?
Getting feedback.
Trying to say like what is the best way for you? How do you do it right now? Does that work for you? Do you know about these other ways that exist now? Do we need to, because a lot of it is just people just need to have better education about how to interact with. A lot of people don't know that you can just show up on Wednesdays at city council and testify and on anything. Like, there's a time limit if you're not doing it with an agenda item, but you can come and talk about anything that is an issue for you.
Right.
So a lot of that
aren't there procedural rules generally, at least from my understanding on the website, about what you need to do before you do that? Like, for instance, you've emailed a commissioner or you've met with a commission about that specific issue, or is it really like Multnomah County? I mean, I know in Multnomah County, you literally, it's the most user-friendly thing in the entire world.
You can just show up.
I mean, it's so interesting. If the mood strikes you, I mean, I just think it's important that people understand this, because I think it's really, I love it. I think it's so accessible. I mean, I know it's kind of awful in some ways because those meetings go on forever. And fortunately,
But you're giving an
the chair can
opportunity
change.
to
Yeah.
anybody.
Yeah.
Yes, and the chair can change like the amount of time people are speaking depending on how many people show up. But if the mood strikes you, you can literally just turn down that street, park your car. Wednesday, is it Thursday? Thursdays.
Yeah.
Um, can you remind us of the time, Tim, that you show up
I
to
think it's
testify?
9
o'clock.
I think that's
Okay,
when.
but check the website because sometimes that
Yeah.
changes, So go to the county and check the website just in case. But if the mood strikes you, you just show up. You go to a desk. As you come in, there's somebody sitting at a desk, and there's a piece of paper, and you write your name on.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And you can talk about whatever you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
There-
you got like 3 minutes to do it.
There's a little more administrative process for the city, but it's still much easier than people think. You really can sign up, and we do have people that will come in. I'm not in every one of those council meetings. My work
Right.
goes outside
Well,
of that.
Goodness.
Right. Yeah. But absolutely, I've been in a bunch of those where there are people come in and talk about concerns that,
Right.
and make their concerns known, and it's really up to them. So,
So you're
that's
saying
just
if
one
it's
example.
not on an agenda item, and I just want to make sure that
Mhm.
people know that the city's accessible. Also, even if because I just haven't done this yet. I've gone in where there's an agenda item and I've signed up. They will tell you, the city
Right.
will tell you, we're looking at this, we're going to discuss this.
Right.
And the deadline for signing up to talk about it or to give testimony on it is at this time, and you can sign up online. It's accessible in the sense that you can do it via Zoom. You can at the county too.
Yeah.
Which is nice. And then usually that, if at least for the city with an agenda item, that window closes, and then they're not taking testimony on that issue anymore.
So what the council clerks do is I'm not as familiar with. I know that you can sign up. Our agenda comes out on Friday afternoons for the next week, so you can
Right.
find out where it is, and then they have a great process online. I would
Yeah.
encourage people to go there and find out a little bit more to their website, which is on
Yes.
the auditor's office's page, portland.gov/auditor.
And they spell it out. I mean, it
Yeah.
says,
It's
at
pretty
least my
straightforward.
understanding
Yeah.
is if it's not on an agenda item, there are a couple procedural hoops you
Yeah.
need to jump through
Yeah,
to get on
but
there.
you can still show up and talk about a general item at the beginning. You'll be time limited, but
Right.
but I don't want it to seem like that's the best possible
Yeah, no,
way.
I was saying more,
Right.
yeah, like
It's-
because I like the idea. I've talked a lot with candidates on here about having a local office,
Yeah.
or even a lot of them just say, just call me. I mean,
Yeah.
and they're candidates right now, but
The reality is most people just don't
something like that.
testify.
I heard something a couple weeks ago about a ticketing system. I don't know if that's being discussed, but
So a lot of this is going to be decided by the new city council.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay.
we're bringing in 12 people. We might have 12 people that have never been on city council before
Right,
as a whole new city council. We
Right.
may get some that have been, I don't know. So part of it is some of these we want to figure out ideas and decisions and have some of it in place.
Mhm.
And some of it is on January 2nd will be the first meeting of city council. One of their first duties will be voting for a city council president.
Mhm.
And then they're going to go, and a lot of these decisions are going to be very quickly made because they've got to figure out how. So
probably in the
one of
first year.
yeah, right. And one of those decisions is council offices in the districts.
Okay.
So it is not something that is right now moving forward, but it is still being debated. I mentioned the Government Transition Advisory Committee. So that's something that they have made recommendations about. They're continuing to sort of do research on, talk to the public, and get and debate about, and they'll make a final recommendation about those things to city council. So those are things that how you interact with are still being decided to some degree, but a lot of the things will still be in place. So you'll still be able to show up at city council.
Right.
You'll still be able to, and I guess the sort of philosophical part of your question, you will have 3 people that are representing you. So in the similar way to right now, you have 4 commissioners that you elect citywide. They all represent the whole city.
Right.
So this is going to be similar, but it'll be 3 people and it'll only be your district. So it's, there's about 160,000 people in each district. So those 3 people between them will represent those 3. Any one of those should be accessible for you to go and talk to about the problems that are in your district. And the whole point of that is they have to live in your district to get elected here. So they're going to be a little more local, a little closer to you. Hopefully they'll understand the issues that you deal with in your district a little better. And each of them should be available as much. Now, how they do that, that's up to them. That's an elected official.
And that might be
thing.
different for every district, how
Absolutely.
they divvy that up.
It's up to different elected officials do it differently, and it's up to them.
The county might be a good example, and I know, Tim, you just implement things, but just from observation, like for instance, Julia Brim Edwards is my I guess, representative. She's in my district. And so she's not going to have there's no runoff in this next ballot coming up. She won't be on there. She's still on the county commission, based on what happened in I guess we'd call it the primary. But what's interesting is when you go to these county commission meetings, you can talk generally to I talk generally to all the commissioners, and it seems like everybody else does too. And even if they're not within my district, I guess it just depends on how people are, right? Because they don't have to. I guess I don't know what the rules are, but
Yeah.
I theoretically, Sharon Myron could say, "Hey, I'm not your commissioner. Like I'm just you're not my constituent, literally." But I feel like in general, the county, they interact with everybody in a way that maybe city council will.
Yeah.
It may
And that's,
not.
yeah, and it's an
I guess we'll
option
just
to,
see how
yeah.
that
I
unfolds, right?
asked that too because I've heard a lot of things about like inter-district finger pointing if things go bad in a district, but also it's one of the things that like I wanted to do away with this old bureau style, like most of the city voted on.
think that
But
was
I see that
popular.
as a problem maybe of like, because in the old kind of days, you'd be like, well, I got a problem with the water bureau. This
Right,
person
that's
handles
true.
it. I'm going to talk to them. And now it's kind of like you've got more options and it's kind of dubious as to who to, I don't know.
Well,
But I don't know. I like that there's
yeah. Well,
multiple ways to.
yeah, I can't really comment on how the elected officials respond. That's going to be
Yeah,
up to
we'll
them.
see how
And
that
it's way outside
unfolds.
of our purview. But absolutely, there will be now. The bureaus will just be in a different place.
Right.
It's still you're still going to be people to talk to, and
You could even go to the bureau directly, probably.
right.
Yeah.
And the hope is that it is.
I guess you
It is
would.
more centralized and more.
Well, that's true.
There's going to be, Michael Jordan often talks about it. He's the interim city administrator right now. He often talks about it as like we're kind of getting rid of the siloing. There's a little more horizontal with the city structure. So there's a little more mixing between. There's more shared resources. There's a little bit more of that. So who you go to will change, but it doesn't mean that they're not still accessible. And we hope that it'll be very clear by the time there'll be a city administrator and there'll be a deputy city administrator that controls. We are, you can go online right now and see who is in charge of what and talk to all of them. So that's all structure that's in place, and we hope that will still be clear come January 2nd who you talk to.
Yeah, I think. There's just more options. It's a good thing, generally a good problem to have. I think that
Well, I think everybody's prepared for everybody to complain to them about everything.
Right.
But like you said, it's a legislative body now, which is interesting to think about. So, yes, if you have an issue with the Parks Department, I guess my guess is the people in your district are going to assume that you're going to complain to them anyway. But there will be a person in charge of that you could also complain to.
Yeah.
That might be more effective, in fact, because that's their job.
Can we switch to? I wanted to talk about this stuff.
Voting?
Yeah, I wanted to talk to this
What
stuff.
you're here for? Yeah.
I know Tim's getting bored. No,
I'm not.
I wanted to
I'm
talk
not.
about what we were talking before we recorded about because I heard from a couple people, candidates and non-candidates, that this single transferable vote style requires all the ballots to be in before we can start anything. And like I said, we talked about this before because I saw this coin story go out that kind of confirmed that. But then we were talking earlier and he said, no, that's not necessarily the case.
Yeah, I think it's a big misperception because currently, in order to determine the winner of the election, we have to have all the ballots in hand. So it is the same now as it will be with ranked choice voting. We are going to be releasing preliminary reports, which will be snapshots in time of the tabulation of ballots that we have done up until that point for the ballots we have in hand, starting at 8 o'clock on election night.
Which sounds really
like
similar, yeah.
Just like we always have. And I think, and yes, ultimately, to determine the final results, we have to have all the ballots in hand, just like we did before. That is not changing with ranked choice voting. Kind of the big change that voters will experience in looking at results is what the results look like. So you won't just see a list of names and a column of vote totals, one column of vote totals. You're going to see multiple columns of vote totals that represent the rounds of tabulation in each set of results. So starting at 8 o'clock on election night, like I said, we will release our first set of results, and that will have the ballots that have been tabulated
Everything you've collected
up until
up
that
to that
point.
point. Yeah.
And typically for us, that's about 50 to 60% of the total ballots cast are released in that first results report at 8 o'clock. And we don't expect that to change. We expect, and with presidential elections especially, people tend to vote earlier.
Higher turnout.
It's higher turnout, and people tend to vote earlier in the cycle rather than in the midterms. They tend to hold on to their ballots later, vote at the last minute. So we expect that number of ballots that we have counted by 8 o'clock on election night could be higher than 60%. In 2020, it was closer to 80%. Of course, there were different factors in 2020
Yeah.
that were driving people to vote earlier that don't exist for the most part today. However, we expect to hit that 50 to 60%, which is our goal of, everything that we have on hand usually by Monday is usually what we are reporting on Tuesday night. Because with vote by mail, a lot of things are not changing. You're still going to get your ballot in the mail. Voter registration works the same. You still have about 20 days to mark your ballot, do your research, and get it back to us the same way. Either that's in your community's Dropbox, wherever that is, whether it's a library or
I use the library. Yeah.
yeah. The libraries in Southeast are very popular. Woodstock Library is
That's mine. Yeah.
is one of the highest turnout libraries in our system. So however you return your ballot, that is not going to change, with the asterisk that the libraries are still going through bond work. So some of the libraries are going to be closed during the election.
That means they're remodeling and things like that.
We have some temporary boxes set up, like say for North Portland Library, which has been closed for a while now. Across the street and down a few blocks is the PCC campus. There's a freestanding ballot box on the corner, like there has been for the last few elections. Midland Library is similar, although Midland is going to be opening in the middle of the election, so it's going to be opening back up. So voters will either have choices once it opens to vote at the library, or they can go to the ballot box that we set up on 122nd and Gleason to replace that box. So that's the only caveat: is check the voters pamphlet, check our website.
Just a little shifting there.
Yeah, to make sure your library or drop site is in the same place, because there's been some shifts. But we haven't closed any. We have the same number of drop sites. We actually have more since the library construction has started. So drop your ballot either in a Dropbox or make a plan to get it in the postal system by the right time, so it will get a postmark. That's something we really want to encourage voters to do, is have a plan. How am I going to return my ballot? Don't wait until election day to all of a sudden think, oh crap, I need to vote and I need to get it back. How am I going to do that? Make that plan early, know what you're going to do. How are you going to research? How are you going to research your candidates?
So many more candidates than there have ever been. And you only have, if you haven't started doing research, you have a certain amount of time to do it before you get that ballot back.
That's correct. There is a deadline.
I'm guessing you're doing the
and there always has
pamphlet
been.
as well.
None of that changed.
That's correct. None of that changed. We still send a voter pamphlet to every household. If you don't get your voter pamphlet, about 5 weeks before the election is when those go out, between 4 and 5 weeks before the election. The pamphlets actually go out before the ballots. And we are still determining whether you're going to get one book for both the state and the county, or if you're going to get two books, because there's a page limit, and because we have a lot more candidates for the city with.
Is that a legal thing, or is it just a cost thing?
It's a physics limit.
Okay.
There are only so many pages that you can stitch inside a book
before it starts to fall apart.
Before it's not physically possible to mail it. Otherwise, you have to go hardcover.
Yeah, and I was going to ask it. I had a question about the pamphlet, but before that, I just want to confirm what we were just saying, because we do not need to wait for all these, because I know there's a couple other counties that are involved with this
Correct.
collection, right?
Clackamas and Washington,
And
yeah.
so you're saying we don't need to wait for all those to come in to start.
Tabulation.
Okay.
Nope.
Okay.
Nope.
I just want to get that
We can.
make that clear.
So we'll go back to Clackamas and Washington in a minute, but we can tabulate. If we only had 3 ballots at 8 o'clock on election night, we could
We can
tabulate
start.
those.
Okay.
Sure.
We are going to have hundreds of thousands of ballots by 8 o'clock on election night. So we will release the results for those.
Okay.
And it's up to voters and the media to learn how to interpret those results. Of course, we will provide a lot of educational materials on our website. I should also mention multnomahvotes.gov is our website.
Okay.
We have a whole dedicated page for ranked choice voting that voters can start educating themselves right now if they want to. They don't have to wait till that ballot shows up, but
Does that
It-
include the city's form of single transferable vote, or is that only related to the county? Well,
The
I
future
guess it would
standard.
have to include the city if it's up now, or maybe not. I don't know. Is it only for the county's future standard for the commissioners?
No, we are focusing. One of the principles in voter education is to give people what they need to know when they need to know it. If you give it to them way earlier than they need to know it, they
It
tend to
doesn't resonate.
They tend to
They
think,
flush it.
well, this is 9 months
We
away.
don't have
Why
room for that.
why do I need to learn about that? They have
Right.
lives. They're busy.
Mhm.
So the county and the city have both agreed to a voter education program that gives people, we didn't start educating people about ranked choice voting before the primary because there's a whole set of rules that govern closed primaries that we want voters to be focused on.
Sure.
And we also don't want to confuse them and think that they were going to be using ranked choice
Right,
voting in the
right,
primary.
right.
So we've been really intentional, the city and the county working together to provide the education when it needs to be happening. And I would
Yeah.
love for both of us to be able to talk about all the things related to ranked choice voting that we are doing to educate voters. But what they need to know about the results is the results will be delivered in about the same time frame that they are now. The big difference with results reporting is with the amount of data that we are having to put together and the fact that we are doing those results reports in-house using software. We're not doing it by hand,
Right.
but the county is producing the results based on the tabulation results that come out of the tabulation system.
But you always use software, right? You were
But we
never
always did that.
doing it by
But
hand.
typically before we would just upload all our results to the Secretary of State's election night reporting website and voters could go to one place
right.
to see the most current results. The Secretary of State's website is not yet configured for the detailed reporting that ranked choice voting requires. So if you go to election night reporting on the Secretary of State's website, you will see City of Portland contest there, but there will be a link to Multnomah
I
County's
see.
website
Links out
to get
yeah.
those results.
Okay.
And what you will only see on the Secretary of State's website is the first rank results. So what voters marked in their first choice, because that's all they have the ability to show right now.
Okay. Yeah.
And
They-
they'll be continually updating that
Yes.
because it's always a snapshot in time until
Correct.
it's certified.
Correct.
Yeah.
But if you want the snapshot in
right?
time reports, you can go to Multnomah County website,
Okay.
multnomahvotes.gov. We will have a whole results reporting website set up with instructions on how to read the reports, what the terminology means, how to determine who's leading, which it's pretty clear in all 3 formats. If you look at the report, these are the leaders at this moment in time.
Yeah.
They'll
By
get their
3 formats, you mean mayor?
No, the 3 formats that we're going to provide is a detailed
Oh, that's
tabular
right. You talked
report,
about this. Okay.
a simpler tabular report for people who don't want every single number,
Granular. Yeah.
and then the clickable bar charts that people will actually be able to click through the rounds of tabulation to see
Mhm.
what happened in the last set of
See that
tabulation.
progression. Yeah.
Yep, but we will be tabulating every ballot that we have on hand at that moment and then releasing those results. And we'll do the first one at 8 o'clock on election night. For the city of Portland, the next one will come the next day, and then the next day after that. And then, typically by the 3rd day or by Thursday after election day, we have reported 93% of the total ballots cast. And then it's just a small number of ballots that kind of are continually being processed. as we get ballots with postmarks up till 7 days after, or
Hmm.
as we get ballots from other counties that were dropped in other counties' drop boxes, or as voters cure their challenge signatures. That's something that
Mm-hmm.
continues to go forward throughout the 27-day certification cycle, and then we will certify the final results on the 2nd of December.
Yeah. But it
And by
sounds,
that,
sorry, go ahead.
by that I mean, this has happened to me before. Apparently, my signature changed one election year. By that you mean when you register to vote. I mean, is that if my memory serves, this will may show how old I am. When you register to vote here in Oregon, you provide a signature, and that signature is matched then to
Correct.
each, because we do mail-in voting. It's matched then to it's usually on the back of the envelope, or yes, and so they will use that as a form of proof that
We do that.
you do.
Yes.
Tim at Multnomah County.
That's not me personally, but
Right, right.
we have well-trained staff that do that, and
Yes.
some software that helps.
Yes, hopefully not just you.
Yeah.
Speaking of strokes, that would be a lot. So as proof that you are who you say you are, and if your signature differs, I'm sure there's some kind of way that's done to compare it, or a formula or something. If your signature differs, according to Multnomah County, you will get that back, and
You
then
won't get it back. You'll get a letter.
Oh, excuse me, a letter.
Or a text or an email. If you're signed up for our ballot tracking service, you can get a text or an email or even a phone call, a robocall.
Oh, that's interesting.
That tells you that we've questioned something about your ballot. And
Right.
I mean, you can get other notifications too, like we've received your ballot, we've counted your ballot. It's a really great service. It's free unless you have data charges related to text messaging or emails.
So we
But
can go on Multnomah County's website and just sign up for
sign
that.
up. And actually now Washington and Clackamas also have the same service.
That's great.
So anyone can sign up for those messages. If we challenge your signature, either because it's changed over time or doesn't match for like you said, there is a procedure that we use that's set in state
Right.
administrative rule to look at similarities.
Yeah.
And if there's not enough matching characteristics, we will send you a letter. That letter goes out no matter what. But if you're signed up for our ballot tracking service, you'll get a quicker reply.
Mm.
And then this election, for the first time, if you get one of those notifications by text or email, you can actually go on our website, download the form that you need to fill out
Mm-hmm.
to certify that you are who you say you are and give us a new signature, or do an attestation if you forgot to sign. And then you can mail that back on your own, or you can wait for the letter. There's a 21-day challenge period. So voters have plenty of time after the election. We usually get all of those letters out by the Friday after Election Day. So if you're signed up for ballot tracking, you will get that message instantaneously. Otherwise, you'll get the letter in the mail, and then you just have to take action in order to get your ballot counted. But it's a very small percentage of ballots that actually get challenged.
Probably not
Sure.
very many. I was going to ask, do you know off the top of your head, it's like a ballpark percentage? It sounds pretty small, but of the neighboring counties that are in the city limits that would be counted in this?
Yes. So one of the challenges with the city of Portland, and I say challenges meaning in the number of challenges that are involved in a pretty big change to how elections are conducted. The city of Portland is the first multi-jurisdictional city that has moved to ranked choice voting. Benton County and Corvallis both moved to ranked choice voting, but the city of Corvallis is wholly contained within Benton County, and Benton County obviously doesn't cross its own county lines. So we had to work with Washington and Clackamas County to create an intergovernmental agreement that would govern how we worked together to tabulate.
I heard it was
tabulate the ranked choice.
contract. They contracted with Multnomah County. Is that the
I
right
mean,
terms?
an IGA is a contract.
Intergovernmental
yeah.
agreement. Okay.
So in theory, you could say they
Because
contracted with
they're
us.
agreeing.
They're deferring responsibility to
Well, not
you.
100%. They are still administering the election for City of Portland voters within their counties. So they are responsible for administering the election for their voters. Where we made an agreement is because there's only how many voters
About
in
1,600 between the two.
1,600
Okay, that's
between
what I
the
was wondering.
two
Yeah.
versus 455,000
5,000.
in
So that's a
Multnomah County.
small percentage. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's a very small percentage, and it didn't make sense economically for all three counties to upgrade their software
Right.
and
Right.
change a lot of their procedures to
They'd have to match what you're
sort of
doing.
handle that.
Yeah.
Right. So with kind of the lots of examination of state law to ensure that there wasn't anything that prohibited this. We had a lot of attorneys in the room when
Mhm.
when these decisions were being made. We worked collaboratively with the Secretary of State's office and their attorney to make sure that as we moved this forward, because ranked choice voting isn't really considered in state law, even though it's allowed by the state constitution. There's really not a whole lot of state statute that covers ranked choice voting. We did a lot of collaboration to say, how do we implement this for three counties collaboratively administering an election for one city? And we came up with a really good balance. So Multnomah County upgraded its tabulation system. We can now create ranked choice voting ballots for all three counties. So as we are preparing our building the ballots this weekend, we are actually creating the ballot styles for the 1,600 voters that need a ballot in city of Portland for those two other counties. And then we will give those two other counties the PDFs, the ballot PDFs, and then they will print those ballots and include those. So all city of Portland voters, whether they're in Multnomah, Washington, or Clackamas, will get two different ballot pages this coming election.
Okay.
And part of that is because of space. Ranked choice voting contests take up more room on the ballot. And part of that is for the ease of administering this multi-jurisdictional city contests for those voters. So the separate ballot card will allow Clackamas County to build its non-ranked choice voting election. And then when they're preparing the ballots for City of Portland voters, they will just insert that separate ballot page that they printed that we gave them the PDF for, and then they will mail out to their own voters. We don't do any of the mailing. The voter will vote the ballot, return it back to those counties, depending on who they are. And then each county will do the signature verification. They will qualify the ballot envelope, and then they will open the ballot. And it's only after the ballot has been qualified and opened that Clackamas and Washington will separate those ballot pages. And then we have two designated times when they will securely transfer those ballots to our office. And then we will add them into the vote totals and then after the election is all said and done, we will transfer those ballots back to those counties so that they can take care of the mandatory retention
They're kind
period
of
for their
the
ballots.
steward of
They're
those.
the
Yeah.
steward of
Yeah.
that ballot. We are
Um,
just taking possession of them temporarily so we can tabulate all the votes for the city of Portland.
This has all been really collaborative
Yeah.
from the beginning. I mean,
Yeah.
all three counties,
Sounds like it
the
would need to
city.
be.
Yeah, we've talked to national experts. So RC Tab, sort of the software.
yeah.
For this,
I was
it's
just
this
going to
open
ask you
source
about that because
software.
that's what
Yeah.
I heard you guys used. Can you talk about that for a little bit? Because I looked at it and it looks. I'm not trying to put any spin on it, but they look like a nonprofit with an agenda that is ranked choice. Like they're pushing ranked choice. But can you talk about the software? And obviously, this was new. You hadn't been using RC Tab.
So the Ranked
Before,
Choice
right?
Voting Resource Center, I think it's really important to understand that they are a nonprofit, that their primary goal is helping jurisdictions like ours, like the city of Portland, implement.
Yeah.
We didn't engage with them before the measure was passed. We engaged with them after the measure was passed. So they are collaborators. They have a lot of experience, a lot of research, a lot of data that shows what other jurisdictions have done. And then they offer that data to us to make policy decisions, basically. They have not influenced us in any way
Okay.
other than to share information that they have collected over years of research.
Yeah. In fact, they've been great. There's lots of questions we've come to about, all right, we have issue number one. We've got to figure out there's different options. And they're great about saying, well, here's 3 different jurisdictions that did it these 3 different ways. It came out this way here. This is, we've done some research. So they've been great about providing the research. We still, each step of the way, we have to make the decision about how it'll be administered and what will be implemented.
And not just us. Other policymakers in the city have
Stakeholders and
yeah.
How does that work exactly? So when you're working out a kink like that, I don't, maybe that's the wrong word to use, but you're trying to decide how something's going to work, and you receive data and information, which is helpful. What is the decision-making process, and who makes that decision?
It depends on what it is.
What the question is.
There's some context based on what it is. So when we, one of the very first things I did when I got to the city, I worked in Illinois elections before this, and I immediately got thrust into meetings with Tim where we were figuring out the election code. So the city's election code, we worked with the counties, with lawyers, with these national experts to figure out what does the code look like in other jurisdictions we're going to write. Now the election code is something that has to pass through city council. So we will talk about what is possibility. We'll work out things like this, but all of it needs to be presented to city council, and then they vote on it and they pass it. And that's any change to the city code. It has to go through city council like that.
And I think it's important to understand, I'm not cutting you off.
Oh, yeah.
Is that we were in the same room together because we were advising them. And we were not advising them on what they should do. We were just saying, here's how this works in real life.
Yeah. You were advising council?
No, we were advising the work group that was working on the code update.
Okay. And
and then make a referral to city council.
Okay.
Right.
So there was a work group working on the city council code, city code.
City code, yeah.
Okay, got it. Thank you. To help implement.
We were just the local election experts.
Yeah.
Right.
And some of it is okay, we have to figure out how many rankings do you get, and some of that is so the county has the software. We're writing how you count these votes, but the county is going to count them. So they'll come back and say, well, feasibly you can do this because it's got to be between this number and this number because that's what the computer can do. And so some of it is just functional. We need to figure out, what are the limits of what we can and can't do. And then within that, and then we would look at other research. We would look at all of that then is kind of put together in a proposal. Some of those are things we said, this is the way it's done everywhere that does RCV. So it just wasn't in the charter. We just need to put it into the code to make it work. And some of it is
city code.
Right. Yeah. And some of it is this is an open question. So one of those things was how many rankings. Yeah. So we proposed to city council. We said anywhere between 5 and 8 we can do. Here's the research that says closer to 5 is better. Here's the research that says closer to 8 is better. And then they debated it, made a decision, they voted on it. So things like that will go through that process and get voted on. And then there are some things which happen at an administrative level. So rules get implemented from that point that we'll put out, and that goes through a process of it's nothing that's going to change the code, so it's not at that level of change, but we need to just figure out a detail. So we're not going to do it differently than the code says, but the code isn't quite clear enough, and then we will figure out, okay, what does it work administratively? What are we going to do? We put it out to public comment for 30 days. It's up on our website. It's out there.
Follows administrative law procedure. Then.
Exactly.
And then that's an administrative rule,
right,
from the elections division.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
I want to come back to the RC tab in a second, but can we just give a quick explainer for people of the single transferable vote, as far as, because what I'm going to do when I vote is focus on my number 1 rank.
Which they can't tell you if you should be doing that or not. So yes, but you're saying as an example.
I just for people that have no idea how to do their rankings, what do you
I have no idea.
Suggest for people? And
or do you?
Well, I certainly can't tell you.
Let's very simply.
Yes.
Choose your first choice candidate.
Yeah.
Put that in rank 1. Choose your second choice candidate. Yeah. Put that in rank 2, 3rd, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
All the way up to 6. If you don't have 6 candidates that you feel strongly enough about, that if my first choice didn't get it, my second choice didn't get it, my third choice didn't get it, Like if you get to the point where you're like, I I don't want anyone else to get
Right,
elected,
right.
stop ranking.
Okay,
We've
that's what
talked
I
about
heard.
she's talked
That's
about in her
important.
show of don't
Vadim
put anyone
Guzerski
on
said
there
that, yeah.
who you wouldn't want to see on
That's
city council.
correct.
Absolutely.
That's correct.
Absolutely.
Because
Okay.
there is a
I'm glad I've
chance
been doling with the right advice.
there is a chance that if you rank someone, they might get elected.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So if you don't want somebody to get elected, don't rank them.
right.
Don't feel obligated to fill out
No,
every.
back over to you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. If you put one ranking in there, your vote will get counted. So that is the minimum you need to do to have your vote counted. One bubble filled in somewhere on that ballot. We will figure out which candidate it aligns to, and we will count your vote. But you absolutely, if you feel that are more candidates that you could support being elected, that you think kind of align with you and you want to represent you, put more candidates in. But don't rank anybody that
That's
you
very
don't want.
important.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that is
And
absolutely.
I
just
think
think-
the temptation, my concern, and the reason that I was asking, and Vadim Mazursky, who's running for Multnomah County Commissioner, was was a member of the Charter Commission, and then of course he quit that position. But within that time period, he seemed to understand something about it, and I got that advice from him that you just need to stop. What concerned me and still concerns me, and this I know this doesn't have anything to do with y'all, but that what you just said is very important, because that I think human temptation is going to be, I've got 6
Just
slots.
fill them all out.
It's
yeah.
6, right? That's how many we'll
Six
have for
rankings,
each
yes.
district.
Yeah.
So I'm in District 4. So I'm going to have 6. I can choose up to 6. And the temptation might be to just fill the whole gosh darn thing in and find, maybe I have one that I really like and the rest I don't care for, but I'm just going to, I guess I'll go in least discussed to most. But what you're saying is, look, don't put anybody down who you don't want governing you.
Right. And I mean, that should always be true on a ballot. Don't
Yeah.
mark anybody on a ballot that you aren't you're not comfortable supporting. One thing I do want to sort of
interesting,
state
yeah.
as factually is, and this
please.
is true of ranked choice voting, it's an important sort of philosophical part of elections, is mathematically, it is impossible for your second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth ranking to negatively impact your first ranking.
Okay.
That's important for people, because sometimes people think they don't want to rank a second or third option because they're afraid
Right.
that somehow there's a weighted measurement there where if they do that, they're taking away the value of their first ranking. Absolutely not true. We won't even look at your second, third, fourth, fifth ranking until that first ranking has either been elected or eliminated from that tabulation process. So it is mathematically impossible. And that's something we hear sometimes, where people are worried putting more rankings will somehow make it more likely that sixth ranking gets a little more likely to get elected, and now my first ranking won't. But
That's not the case.
It's absolutely mathematically not the case.
What is the number that somebody needs to get, or will it just depend? It may depend on how everybody ends up voting. But is there a threshold number that somebody needs to get to, just for you all to say this person, we know this person's in because we only have this many ballots left?
No, we don't call elections. We just count the ballots.
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry, you're that's true.
the threshold for election,
We won't
though,
really know. I guess we don't know till the
yeah,
end.
the threshold for election for a council race is 25% plus 1.
What does
for-
that mean?
I'll let James explain, but for a single winner, for mayor or auditor,
Sure.
it's 50% plus 1. And that's based on the number of ballots that are cast, obviously. So we can't give you an exact number of what it would take to win.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. So it's 25% plus 1 of the ballots that get voted on and get ranked in that first round. So if an example in your district, if 100,000 people vote in that district, it's a great turnout. I hope that happens. I hope it's more. If that happens, then we get 100,000 ballots in for District 3. We're in District 3 that it ranked at least one candidate. So in city council races, that threshold is set in round one and it does not change. It's important that it doesn't change because it's important to know that each of those councilors is going to be elected with the same number of votes, the same threshold. So it doesn't change as the ballot numbers change. So in that first round, if there were 100,000 people that voted, that means to get elected, you need 25,001 votes. So 25,000, 25% plus one extra additional vote. So in the first round, if somebody gets to that, then they will be elected and they're fine and they're done. If nobody gets to that in the first round, then that is where we will then look at
the next
who has
round.
the lowest. And, you know, it's some people with low vote counts. We'll eliminate whoever has lowest, and how many ever ballots were for them. We'll move that to the next ranking on their.
And I just want to
And
clarify
that's
when
always
he
changing
said
potentially.
get elected, he
Yeah.
meant who's leading in
Yeah, because
preliminary
that's always
results.
changing,
Yeah.
and that's why you keep saying.
Exactly.
I want to say qualifying sounds pejorative, and I don't mean it that way, but it does. You are qualifying because it's not certified until it's
Right.
certified, so it's not over till
That's
it's over.
correct.
Yeah.
And the media is going to call it how they're going to call it, but
Based
that's
on
Right.
based on
like,
whatever
Right.
like you
they
said. Yeah,
decide
yeah.
Right.
they think is correct. But
Right.
but Tim, what you're saying is these are snapshots in time as they've always been,
Yep,
as they've always
that's
been.
correct. Right.
So those of us who you know, have maybe worked on campaigns or have helped people out or volunteered or whatever, you might go to some event and you're checking that it's popping up on their wall, you know, every few minutes or something, what the current count is. Well, that still is how it's going to be. It's not going to change. It's always a snapshot in time
That's
until it's
correct.
over.
Right.
Yeah.
And as you pointed out, Tim, you know, you never know. I mean, you were talking about Kit Sauber's gubernatorial race and how people weren't sure that he was going to win, and then he did win. So,
And
you know,
sometimes the
things change.
media miscalls things.
That
sometimes,
happens,
yeah.
right? Of course.
Sometimes candidates.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
Preliminarily,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and so so this is all about tabulation,
Yeah.
James,
And
right?
by the time we get the results in the city, we get them by December 2nd. That's set in state law
Wow.
by to get them.
Okay.
When we get them from the county, those are all the ballots have been counted.
Right.
They're saying these are our final vote tabulations and results. So those we get on December 2nd are file. We then, as quickly as we can, we've got 12 business days. So the 18th of December is our last day to do it. We, as quickly as we can, we'll go through that, make sure it's all in the process, write up the report, which kind of includes, voter turnout and some other things. You can see any of these reports from previous elections. We then go to city council, we present that, and city council will then certify those people as elected. So until they do that, even this process is the vote count is final, but until the city council certifies those candidates, then we send them a certification. They know, okay, I'm officially elected. Other processes will be in place by then going forward, but that is sort of the city's timeline for getting that.
Yeah.
So and we don't deal with the percentage of ballots. That's something that they deal with as they're getting in and the results.
And I just also wanted to mention, we piloted a turnout dashboard in the primary this year. I think it went pretty well. We're going to be doing that again in November. I think we're still calling it a pilot because we're still trying to figure out all of the pieces of it. But one of the pieces that we are going to add for this November election is projected turnout. That's not something we've ever
Oh, wow.
done before. But we have all this historical data that typically shows us, what is going to be the overall percentage of turnout, and sometimes we're wrong. We do these internal projections to help us plan staffing, those kinds of things. So we are going to be more public with those projections this time. So we hope to be able to provide not just what turnout is at that moment, but what we expect it to be. And that will help people kind of gauge how many more ballots is it possible could come in, how many more ballots are there left to be counted. And that's something new that we're going to be doing this election.
That seems great, yeah.
To help, because
It's
that's
a transparency thing to me.
it's transparency. And I think it's also like even though every election is a little bit different depending on what's on the ballot, is there a hot measure, is there a heated contest for a candidate position, that can change every election. We don't always know what it will look like. But what we do have is a lot of data about past elections, and internally for years, we've been using that data to plan staffing. It has all sorts of benefits
Yeah.
to know when are the ballots going to come back, How many people do we need to process those? And so we're just going to be more public with those estimates this time. So hopefully that will help people understand where we are at in the vote count. So like you mentioned, campaigns on election night, if they can see, there's 275,000 ballots counted, the county is estimating that they're going to get, in the city of Portland, maybe 450,000 ballot. That would be 100% turnout. Or
I love
we're
it.
probably not
We
going to
could
get
shoot for
100%
that. We
turnout,
could shoot for
but we would
100.
love it. But whatever that number is, we hope to have that projection.
Yeah, that sounds like a great tool. Yeah, I was thinking too,
What if nobody hits the if
the
nobody hits the
25.
25% plus one? That's possible.
You mean in the first round or
Yes,
whatever the
first
counting? Yeah.
first
In the,
round.
let's talk
Or,
about
or
the
do we say
Yeah.
first round? What do we say?
So in the first results report,
First results report. First
it is
snapshot in time, I guess.
so it's important for people to understand that when we run the results for ranked choice voting, we are running all of the tabulation. So we are conducting what's called the round by round tabulation. Every time we push the button to tabulate, we're conducting all of the rounds of tabulation that are required under ranked choice voting rules.
Fair.
So we are conducting all of the tabulation each time we do a results report. So when we do an instance of a preliminary results report, all of the calculations are done. So you will see candidates leading. You will see candidates that have reached the threshold,
Just like you always
Just-
have, I guess.
just like you
Before it was
always
50%.
have, but it's still a preliminary report.
Right.
So our terminology on those results reports will say leading.
Mhm.
Yes.
It won't say elected.
Right.
Right.
Because they're not elected till it's certified.
On election night, no one gets elected.
Right. That's right.
Right.
I
Yeah.
think we forget the public. I mean, we forget how procedurally that works.
Now, the media
Right.
may choose to, based on those
That's-
preliminary
they have
results,
their own projections and
they may choose to call the election
Sure.
based on formulas and data
Yeah.
and experts.
they have their own analysts sometimes. And
That's their choice
Right.
based on their philosophy
obviously
as a
it
news
doesn't
reporting.
reflect you yet.
Has nothing to do with us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just based on the data that we are putting out.
Right. I was thinking earlier, the way you're talking about the initial early reporting sounds like you said many times. It's really similar to what we're doing now, which is great.
Very similar.
The only difference, and maybe I could be saying this wrong, so the rounds is more tracking. That update process is tracking where that single transferable vote may be transferred to, and that's how it kind of updates, or new votes that are incoming as well.
Let's use the terminology rounds when we're talking about the tabulation process.
Right, and that's
That's
separate
happening.
from the reporting.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's separate from the reporting. The reporting, think of those as individual results reports. So are you asking about the rounds of tabulation within the tabulation process?
Yeah, I guess I it's making more sense now that I'm thinking about it. But so every time you run a tabulation,
It includes all of the rounds.
It'll do every
right?
round.
That's not
It does every
necessarily
round
shifting.
instantaneously.
The only difference is it's including more ballots and it's
Including
updating
more
each time,
ballots,
right,
right?
yeah.
Each time.
Right.
Okay.
But the whole process does happen. So sort of to answer your question, I mean, if you assume, let's just to put it all in context, let's assume we're talking about on election night, we have 60% of ballots. We're gonna go through. It's all preliminary. We're not electing anybody. But you will see when it comes out. Say there were 10 candidates. It might take 7 rounds to get to our 3 winners. This is just numbers. So you will see all 7 of those rounds. We will keep going until we get to all of those winners. And in the first round, you might see in the first round within that 60% of ballots on election night being counted, you might see in the first round that nobody gets to that 25% plus 1. And it's 25% plus 1 of the 60% we've counted at that point. We don't know how many will eventually be counted for sure. We have a projection, but we don't know exactly. So whatever that number is, it's possible in that first round on that election night that nobody will get there. And if they don't, then that's when we go to our second choice. So we'll eliminate somebody the lowest. We'll go to that next count. When we get to a winner in the city council race, and this is what separates city council from
What do
the
you
mayor
mean
and
by
auditor.
we go to second choice? So in the first round, you're only looking at people's number ones.
That's
Yeah,
correct.
their highest ranking.
That's helpful.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
And you're
that's so
talking
helpful.
about
That's so helpful.
sub 25% situations.
So you're possibly
Right.
doing 6 rounds. It just depends on how
We could do
how many
30.
ranks
Yeah.
there are.
If there are 30
Yes.
candidates, it could take 30 rounds.
Right.
And that's what, in that coin interview, that's what
Right.
Ken Body
I
was talking
understand.
about.
Okay.
Right.
But
it
each
taking
but,
weeks.
but all of
Yeah.
those rounds would happen instantaneous.
Yes.
Right.
Each time we push the button.
If it takes 30 rounds to decide who is leading on election night, you will see all 30 rounds on the report on election
Okay.
night.
And that may or may not be people's number one. Are you going to say which round you're on? Right? Like we know with round
You're going to see
one.
them all.
You'll see all of
Okay.
the rounds.
As many,
So we know
as, many
what
as it takes.
round
you'll
one
see.
Think of
is everybody's number
a large
one.
spreadsheet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Round one is everybody's number one. And then the numbers will come out about who everybody's number one was. I mean, it's not going to be
It's all
assigned
gonna
to
be in the
you
same
because it's
report.
anonymous,
Right.
but you'll see if
Correct.
there were enough, if let's say Eli Arnold in District 4, did he get enough number ones or who did, if anybody.
Right.
And then if you
Yeah.
do or don't have those people, because you're still going to need to fill
Yeah.
3 slots ultimately,
Right.
right? And so then round 2 means you're now moving on to people's number 2.
Yeah.
Well,
Or-
so
Yeah.
the first round is everybody's
Everybody's number
one,
one. Yes.
right? And then after that, let's assume we're in a situation where nobody got to enough to
that
be
threshold.
leading, to be declared.
That's the first step in the algorithm.
And that would be
Did somebody reach the
25%
threshold?
Okay.
plus
Did
1.
somebody reach the
Right.
threshold?
So assuming that nobody reaches the threshold, now we look at whoever has the lowest. So say I'm running, James, I've got only my mom voted for me. I got 1 vote.
Right.
I have the least votes in that first round, number 1 votes. So my mom's ballot will now,
Interesting.
I will be eliminated in this results of tabulation
Yes.
for the point in time we're at right now, this snapshot. I will be eliminated from the counting. And
So you don't get to move on to round 2.
in this
In that
snapshot,
hypothetical.
right.
In that
In this
hypothetical.
This snapshot. So I only got that 1 ballot. My mom marked me as number 1. We will go look at my mom's ballot and we'll see what is the next one. So her number 2. So Tim is her number 2. Now we move. Sorry, I'm making us
I'm
candidates.
flat.
But James
I'm
might
flat.
come back in round 2.
No, not.
Or is James out?
No, I am eliminated
For
from this counting,
For
this
this
snapshot
instance
of
of
counting.
tabulation, James has been eliminated.
Yes, I can no longer be
But in the
declared
second
leading.
instance of
Yes.
tabulation, it starts from scratch.
Right. So when
Do we call that round 2?
so on the next
No.
day,
We're,
Second
we're
instance
encouraging you not
of
to call it.
tabulation.
Yes.
Second instance of
so
tabulation.
so maybe now we've got 70% of ballots in on day 2. Now we run it again.
We
and
run
now
the results reports
right.
again.
Mhm.
So now my
Second instance
uncle
of
and my
tabulation's
dad
day
send in their
2.
ballots a little bit later. So now
Okay.
I've got 3 ballots. I still am probably the lowest. I would still in that round potentially be limited, but maybe all of my supporters were really late. So maybe on that second day when we have 70-ish% of ballots or whatever, maybe I have 10,000 more people to vote for me.
I see
So
what
now
you're
my
saying.
round 1 might be
That's a
10,000
Kitzhaber
more.
situation.
Right.
I mean, it's
Right.
just, it's not the same, but I'm just thinking, okay, so suddenly we know there are all these people who did rank James as number 1, but in
it's
the
not
first
suddenly.
tabulation, we didn't
Yeah.
see him there. No, it's not. It could be somebody they all mailed it in.
Right.
Right.
And so it shows up later.
Right.
And then in the second instance of tabulation, James is back in the game because enough people ranked him as number 1.
Yes.
Correct.
And it mattered
Yes.
versus because you're comparing it to the first tabulation still,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
it's all we start over.
Think of it as
Oh,
starting
it's a
over.
blank slate,
It's
right?
like,
Well, that makes
say
sense
you're-
because you're
say
still
you're-
looking for that 25% plus
Say
1.
you're counting marbles into a
I
jar,
understand.
right?
Okay.
And you get to 100, and then your
Sure.
friend brings you 50 marbles, but you forgot how many were in the jar. You dump out the jar, and then you count 150. It's a very similar situation with the ranked choice voting results and with all the results.
Mm-hmm.
Every time we run a results
Sure.
report, we are adding more ballots to, because if every voter
Right.
voted
Right.
on the first day they got their ballot and we had 100% of the ballots back by the Friday before election day, we could press the button and be done.
Of course.
But that's not how voters work.
Mhm.
Right.
voters have the opportunity to vote right up until 8 o'clock on election night. If you're mailing it back, don't wait until 8 o'clock on election night, because
Please.
then you don't have any options to get a postmark. But each instance of results reporting, we are adding more ballots,
Right.
and therefore we are starting the tabulation over.
And
So
that's
all of these calculations that we just did in this scenario would happen again,
Yeah.
but with slightly different vote totals for each of the
Mhm.
candidates.
yeah, and I know this is maybe
It's very complicated.
not
I
a
know.
good thing, but I was just thinking about it, like it makes sense to me what you were just saying. Like if we lived in a state or a jurisdiction where people did all in-person voting, you could theoretically just have immediate results. It's just because we
Which
have
does
this.
not exist, by the way,
Okay.
because every state has to do some mail voting
uh-huh.
There's some
because of
exceptions. There's somebody living overseas.
somebody's away at college.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
You know.
Military.
So
Totally.
every
Totally.
state does a combination of mail voting and in-person
Yeah.
voting. Even Oregon does some
Absentee is
Absentee,
what
Even
in
Oregon
Washington
does some
State it's
in-person
called.
voting.
I was
Yeah.
just pointing out to say that we're doing it that way because we're waiting for more ballots
Yes.
that are
Right.
incoming.
The way I like to say it is if every voter chose to vote on the first day they got their ballot, we would have all of the results on election night,
Yeah.
and the election would be over. There would be not, like we would just move into certifying the election.
So there's just one tabulation. There'd just be one. You'd only need
Exactly.
one
Theoretically,
tabulation.
yeah.
Exactly.
So we're dealing with, there's a difference between rounds and tabulations.
Yep.
Yes.
That's what I've learned. I've learned that today
Yeah,
for
yeah.
sure.
That's helpful.
Yeah, think of a round as a small piece of the overall tabulation.
Right. Those are within
ranked
each
choice voting,
tabulation.
yeah.
Okay. Can we talk about ballots for a second? We
Sure.
kind of talked about them a little bit, but one thing that I heard that I'm sure you can clarify is that in other areas that use ranked choice, the listing of the candidates is randomized, and I heard that ours was not in Multnomah County.
That's
but I don't
more a state law. That's more a state law choice
determine that.
than it is, because what Oregon does is it has the Secretary of State's office does a alphabet randomization at the beginning of the election cycle. They did it about 3 weeks ago for this election.
Okay.
And then they send that to all the county elections offices. And that random alphabetization is then how we put the candidates on the ballot.
Right.
So the candidates are randomized based on their last name,
That makes
basically. And
sense,
if their
yeah.
last names are the same, which we have, I think District 4 has
There's
two
couple
candidates with the same
same,
last
yeah.
name,
There
then
are a
we go
couple.
to the first name. But that's how the randomization works, but it only happens one time.
Right. You're not saying on an individual
Yeah.
basis. Yeah.
There are some states that require a sort of dynamic randomization, or for ballots to be produced, like if you're producing 100,000 ballots, like every third ballot has to be
certain number,
randomized.
yeah.
Something like
Okay.
that. But that's not the way the law
So
works in
but that
Oregon.
answers my question though. But yeah, there is some randomization. It just happens at a sort of universal level.
At
So
the-
everyone
at
sees the
state
same.
level, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And for us, it's worth saying we get this all the time from candidates trying to decide,
Sure.
do I
I'm
file
I'm
early? Do I
sure,
file
yeah.
late? Like they try to strategize it, and we tell them every election
Doesn't
cycle,
matter.
you file,
It's
you
out of
should
your
always file
hands.
earlier, because if there's a problem, you have a chance to
course.
fix it. So we always
Right.
push people to file earlier, and make sure you get through it all, but it makes no difference. It doesn't, you're going to end up where you're on the ballot based on your name. So unless
Based
you're
on a random drawing.
right.
Yeah.
So James, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, does anybody know, and maybe we don't, because maybe it's sort of like it's something a math PhD needs to help us figure out hypothetically, but is there a minimum threshold in our system for someone to become a city councilor?
The election code is written such that we will, through this process, as long as there are 3 candidates on the ballot, we will have 3 city councilors elected. So
Right.
it will go through, and the threshold to be declared a winner through the process is that 25% plus 1.
Right.
We will continue to run rounds and eliminate candidates from the lowest up until we get to either 3 winners, or we have eliminated all but 3 candidates left. So mathematically speaking, it is possible that your first two candidates get elected with that 25% plus one, and then in the end you have enough people that voted for enough different candidates, or just didn't, where the ballots are exhausted, because
Right.
exhausted just means there's nobody left that is an active candidate on that ballot. And so you could have somebody that's elected with, say, 20% or whatever. So it is mathematically possible.
But we don't
If
know
it
what that
doesn't,
number is. I mean, it'd be
Correct.
some
it's based on the number of
theoretical
people that,
number.
well, it's based
Based
on the
on
number of people that vote.
Yes, based on a whole bunch of things though, right? Based on like who got past that 25% plus one threshold, if anybody,
So you're saying
too, right? I mean,
it's
it's just
There
there's a lot of
always will
hypotheticals
be
here.
there always will be and when I say always, there's there's always exceptions,
Yeah.
but like James just said, the only way that only one person would get to 25% plus one is if the last two candidates got exactly the same
Hmm.
number of votes,
Hmm.
right? I think there will always be at least two candidates with 25% plus one,
correct. Yes.
unless
Yes.
unless both of the remaining candidates got the exact same number of votes and neither one of them
How
had
does
reached
that
the threshold.
happen? Because there's just so many gosh
Yeah.
darn
It just
people.
the number of candidates and the division between all that
Yes.
kind of
So,
stuff. And
getting a little math nerdy here, the election threshold for the multi-winner ranked choice voting that the city is doing is statically allocated. So
Mhm.
it's allocated in the first round and it does not change. So that is what leads to situations. If that threshold was dynamically allocated and it was allocated, if it was recalculated after each round of tabulation within that overall tabulation, then you would always get someone who reached 25% plus one.
Correct.
And with single winner, the way the city's single winner is set up, it is dynamically allocated in each round of tabulation. The threshold for election is recalculated each round. So
Hmm.
that is that is just the way it works.
Sure, the
Right.
threshold is
Right.
recalculated
In single winner.
in
Right.
single winner.
But in multi-winner, it is not. And that's how you end up in, and that is a situation that voters could decide they don't like, and it could be changed. But that was,
And it
So-
is, and we, we've looked at other places that have done this, including outside the country, and it is a pretty rare situation. It does take sort of this world in which a lot of people either don't rank that race at all, or rank one, or rank, don't rank enough. Typically, because we're talking about hundreds of thousands of ballots, even with a bunch of candidates, if you're ranking two or three, the situation where you can't get three people to 25% of that vote. In fact, oftentimes we hear the opposite complaint, that's too easy to get to the 25% plus one. So I think there's two sides of that coin,
Right.
but
Yeah, it just
but
depends on-
mathematically,
sure.
mathematically that's what's going to happen, and it is possible. We don't expect it to happen, but it is important when we wrote the election code to make sure we didn't want to end up in a situation where we get to the end and we're like, well, we didn't elect three people. Now what do we do?
Right.
So we wanted to make sure that no matter what, we would elect three people
It's
at the end, and
built
it would
in,
be, and
yeah.
it will always be the three people that have the most support in that contest. So
And
even if we end up eliminating and that third person doesn't get 25%, they still will have more than everybody else had in that race.
and I think there's sometimes a lot of
Yes, I
focus on
understand
these
that.
mathematical edge cases
Yeah.
that are not likely to happen.
Yeah.
Right?
It's extremely
That
rare.
are not likely.
I
to
was just sort of
Yeah.
thinking about it, like, and I know, I mean, this is just a hypothetical, but if I'm in a district where I just feel like I've got odious choices here, and I do have my number one, and
And
then
you're in District 4.
yeah,
You
I
have
mean, that's not true,
You
but
have 30 choices.
but let's say I don't like them
Okay,
though.
that's true. That's possible.
I mean,
That's possible.
they're let's say I'm just not into them. And so I've got my one that I want to see on city council, but I can't sleep if I put anybody else down. And I know that this may be a rare case, but in the instance where you just, for whatever reason, people don't love their pool, and they are educated. They have learned from y'all that, hey, if you don't want to see this person representing you in government, governing you really, and legislating for you, do not rank them. And so we've all just maybe we've decided, hey, we just like one. There's one we like. Um, then we do get into some tricky math potentially, right? Because
I mean, I don't think it's tricky math. I think that it makes it more mathematically possible that you don't have enough to get everybody to 25% plus one.
sure.
I don't think
No, I
it's,
guess that's
yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean. I'm
yeah.
sorry. I'm an idiot about a lot of things, but math is one of the main one. And so, yeah, it might be tricky for me, but you're right. I mean, there's an algorithm, there's software, and
Right.
obviously there's not for you. And so, but this is why we're talking theoretically, of course, and hypothetically, we can't really say what some sort of minimum threshold would be because we don't know what people are ultimately going to do.
Well, yeah,
And we
and
don't know how many are going to turn out. And we
I
don't
want to
know.
I want to be super clear, like, because I'm not 100% sure how you're using minimum threshold in this context, but there is no minimum threshold. Like we
Right.
said, we will elect 3 people. There
Right.
right now we know there's going to be
There
more
are
than 3
3
candidates on the ballot.
slots.
There
So
will
as
be
long
3 people
right.
elected.
So we
Right.
will elect 3 people.
Right.
There's no mathematical situation where we'll be like, nobody got there. Let's try again next year. No matter what, we will end this election. December 2nd, we'll get the results, and those will have 3 people that won. So that will happen. There's not a threshold at which we won't have 3 winners.
And you're also saying, don't rank anybody that you don't want to see on city council because once your number 1 has reached the 25% plus 1, then we go on to your.
If you're number one, then
that's it.
That's it for
You're
your
done.
ballot.
Yeah.
You're
Your
done.
vote is finished.
Yeah, your
That's
vote is finished.
That's why I finally understand this single, because you get one thing.
Unless we're talking about a council race and your candidate.
Yes, I'm sorry. I'm talking about a council race.
You
Thank
chose
you.
the first ranked
Thank you.
winner.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's what I
Then-
mean, I guess. Yeah.
Then if your vote, was one of the votes that pushed them over the threshold and they went over the threshold, then there would be some redistribution.
That's the transfer.
Part
of
the
it.
surplus
Right.
transfer of a small fraction of each vote. But other than that, you're done.
Yeah.
But you're potentially
Your
going
candidate
all
got
the way
elected.
down to my number 6 if you need to.
Potentially.
If we need
Absolutely.
Yeah,
to.
and that's why you're saying don't rank anybody
Well-
you don't want to see.
Well, I do want to clarify. It is important for us to say, don't put someone on your ballot that you don't support. So sometimes people
Right.
get a misunderstanding. They see a 6th ranking. That's the bad ranking. It's like a good to bad scale.
Right.
It is not that.
That's what I was
So
concerned.
don't
That's
put
what I'm
someone as
concerned
your
about.
6th ranking that you
Yeah.
don't want elected. However, I will say
but your number 1 needs to be clear.
Right.
Yeah.
We do at the city encourage people to rank as many as you're comfortable with. So we do encourage you to rank more. We think that if you rank 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 or 6, more of your intention is seen on that ballot. So you get more of your choice.
Right. So
kind of
if you're
going
lucky
through.
enough to have what you would consider a deep, if you will, district, if you're lucky enough to have enough candidates that you'd like to see legislating for you and governing over you, then maybe you get to all 6.
And that's a judgment of the candidates that we obviously can't.
We're
or
all
wouldn't
just
get
going to have
into,
to
and
individually decide that.
Yeah,
And so that's part of, I think,
Right.
that's the most interesting thing about this to me is this hypothetical of I'm just in this district where I don't care for anybody but my one. And then as results are coming in, I'm saying, oh, wow, this is so interesting. Like I'm not the only one who just picked one person. But there are 3 slots.
Yeah.
And so you keep going until the 3 are filled. And that's why there's a difference between rounds and tabulations.
And we do see, we've looked at a lot of the research coming out of other cities, and we do see, a large majority, 80% plus of people in the cities that have been running this for a little bit do rank 3 or more. So it is uncommon for there to be an election where you have a majority of people that only ranked 1. Now, we haven't done this here before, so we're gonna collect the data. We're gonna look at it, and we're not gonna change the system. That's up to the
of course
voters.
not. It's the
but
system.
we absolutely have a mandate to do voter education. So if we come out of this and we see,
No, that's really helpful.
wow, like everybody sort of had this misunderstanding about how things are going to get tallied.
you.
Like we need to
Yes, thank
focus on
you.
that next time,
And then
we can adjust there.
And then the research also shows like this was a big consideration when we, along with the Ranked Choice Voting Resource Center and others, were discussing how many ranks to have on the ballot.
Right.
There's a big discussion is because it wasn't specified in charter.
Mhm.
So, there's a lot of research out there that analyzes when people stop ranking,
Right.
when
There's
is
a
there
cutoff somewhere.
when is there a
Yeah.
fatigue point?
Voter
Right.
fatigue, yeah, if you will.
And I think,
6 is a
know,
lot.
not going to dive deep into that research, but basically the vast majority of people will rank 5 or 6.
Okay.
And so the city felt comfortable recommending that number
Sure.
because, like, as people become more familiar with ranked choice voting, they tend to utilize more of the rankings.
Yeah.
So it's also,
Yeah, okay.
and again, I don't want to call this an edge case, but the vast majority of people do use all the rankings that are offered.
Yeah.
I guess what I'm thinking though is that maybe in that research people aren't as good as y'all are. And so they're not doing things like what you just said to me is so important, which is a couple of things that I heard are so important to me. One is don't put anybody down that you don't want to see on there. And so as James said, it actually doesn't work that you're ranking them best to worst. You don't want to, I mean, ultimately, you don't want to, you wouldn't put on a worst.
It's best to worst that you're still comfortable
Right.
electing.
Yes.
Anyone
Yeah.
you
That's right.
support.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
best to worst that
Most
you
support
want
to
to
least
see.
support
Right.
would be
Yeah,
yeah,
on
but
city
it's still
council.
supporting. Yes.
Yeah, and
Yes.
so it's got to
I-
be somebody you want to see, and I just think that's so important because I mean, I might say, yeah, it's sort of like a classroom, and I'm going to go A+ through the F, and that's not how this works.
Mm-hmm.
I will
It's
say
a
I
vote.
think that
You're still voting for somebody.
I think that many of the other jurisdictions that we've worked with on this and talked to and been involved have been amazing. So I don't think
Sure, and
we're as much as I take that as a
obviously, I
compliment,
don't live
think
there.
we're better than the other
And
places done
obviously, I
this in
don't
any
live there, and
way.
I don't hear that. And it's
Right.
possible that nobody even gets
Yeah.
to this point
And-
of this video and hears that, right? And so it's
Yeah.
possible that nobody actually follows this. But what was important to me to hear is that I mean, as fringy as I might sound to pick only one, I mean, to be, I don't know. There are districts that I
And
look
that's
at
your
that I'm like,
right.
I think I'm just
Yeah.
gonna, I would just have one.
Yeah,
You
well,
know, I
And
just
that's
think
your
it's
right
interesting.
as a voter.
Yeah.
It's
And your
just
vote will
so
still get
interesting
counted.
Yeah,
to me.
and
It's
your vote will
philosophically
still
very
get
interesting, and
counted.
I know y'all don't have anything to.
And if
This
you
isn't
look
a
at
philosophy class,
if
but
you look at first past the post contests, there is only one choice, and
right, that's right.
and many people choose not to vote anyone
Sure.
on the ballot.
Sure,
I mean,
and people do that anyway.
Yep.
Currently, when
Currently.
it's just two people running for a position,
Correct.
right? Yeah.
And sometimes people, we hear a lot that in that first past the post, in that single choice election, they're not picking the person that they most support. They're picking the one that they think will be most likely to be elected.
Right.
So this is part of this
Interesting.
is if you have more than one choice, now you can still do that, but you can also sort of do, your most.
It's one of the reasons I'm glad we're doing this, because I feel like all the stuff we just talked about puts a lot more individualism into the
It really
voter,
does.
but that
absolutely.
requires education.
It
which
really
is like I'm
does.
saying, I'm glad
So
you're here
thank
to
you.
talk to us.
That's why we're emphasizing it.
And so
sure.
my understanding is the only place that does exactly what Portland does, which is multi-member districts with ranked choice voting. Single transferable vote is just a form of ranked choice voting,
is,
as you
yes.
you all
it
have
is a
explained to me.
form of electing multiple candidates to one
for multi-member
Right.
districts.
And so the one jurisdiction that we know does things the same that Portland does is Cambridge, right? Massachusetts.
They have a similar algorithm. They have more candidates on the ballot. You can rank more. They have more rankings. So
Oh, interesting.
right.
Yeah.
But there are other places that
Okay.
do have
Single
single transferable
transferable
vote. Right.
Right. But they don't, do they have multi-member districts?
Yes.
Yes.
And
Single transferable vote by
you
its
have
nature.
to,
is
yeah,
it's
it
used to
requires
get
only
right,
is
because
six.
otherwise it wouldn't be transferring.
Right.
Right.
Correct.
Exactly.
everything else. What I would call standard ranked choice voting is single member district.
Right.
Is it okay to kind of
Oh yeah.
We can wrap it up. Yeah.
Thank
I
you.
was gonna say I have a
I
bunch.
have another.
Yeah.
Of course. You're doing this is all you do. So thank you.
Yeah. So if you have other questions, I know you wanted to talk about RC tab. So
I mean, we did a little bit. I was
Okay.
just more curious, like how you landed on that. Was there a selection process? Most of my concerns with that are like I made a spoof a long time about Cover Oregon. I don't know if you remember that rollout. So I have a lot of hesitation with software and government.
sure.
But from what I know about you, I just have a lot of trust in what you're saying. People have told me you're a great guy. They trust you. So I'd assume the county has great software people to implement this open source RC tab stuff.
I mean, it feels good to hear that people trust me. However, I want them to trust the process.
Right.
That's the most important thing for me, and I'm happy to talk
Well, they trust that you're implementing a good
about
process.
the thorough processes that we do of testing software. So first of all, there is a federal certification body for
Software.
election software,
Yeah.
election tabulation software. The EAC oversees that. That's the Election Assistance Commission. And there are 2 laboratories that are certified in the country that can test tabulation software. Oregon requires a lab test in order to certify any software for sale in Oregon requires a lab test from one of those 2 federally certified labs. So as soon as ranked choice voting passed, we went through a process of looking, and when the measure passed that for the city, we immediately started looking at our options. We have a very competent vendor for our current software called Clear Ballot. We've been with them since 2015.
Okay.
We did an RFP to select them that was very thorough, and we are very confident in the software that they provide us for first past the post. They did not have a ranked choice voting module,
Right.
so immediately we started talking to them and saying, "How would you implement this?" Given the time frame that we were on, and the fact that staying with our current vendor is the shortest path, if we had to go out for an RFP, it would have been
It's a long process.
it could have taken a year just
Yeah.
for that RFP, and there's no guarantee that the vendor pool would have led to a vendor that could have done
Right.
exactly
You
what we
could have
needed
had
to
no
do.
option.
Right. We could have had 0 options. So we chose to work with our vendor to update their software. And then they internally made a decision with coordination with us to build open source software into their software. So
Okay.
RC Tab is a tabulation program that is open source,
Right.
publicly available. Anyone could download
Yeah.
it.
You can go on the website
It's
and get it. Yeah.
it's been tabulating ranked choice voting elections for ranked choice voting for many, many years. However, what it doesn't have is a front end. Like there's no software
That's
public.
why I was asking about it. It's open
Right.
source. It's just a bunch of codes. Obviously, somebody there
Right.
has to plug
You
it
have
in.
you have to get cast vote records. That's what RC Tab ingests is cast vote records.
Okay.
It does not scan ballots to create cast vote records, and that's what our tabulation system does. It scans ballots and creates cast vote records that then can be fed into
That's the clear.
RC
the clear-
count,
gotcha.
which made by Clear Ballot.
So the clear count is integrating the open source.
That's correct.
Gotcha. Okay.
And that was the most expedient way.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Yeah.
But all of that software went through the federal certification process. So once they had the build in place, the software build, then that whole software code package
That was
went through
certified.
the federal
Okay,
certification process. And then that was completed a while ago. And then they had to submit that test lab report to the state. And then since January, we have been taking the software that went into certification. They gave us a demonstration copy of that software, the same code that was in certification, on what we call a virtual machine. It's not connected to our
Right.
current system. It's just a system that we can run that mimics our current
Yeah, it's like
system.
Emulation.
So
Yeah.
that we could create ballots, we could mark ballots, we could tabulate ballots, so we could test.
That's how you do all your testing.
That's how we do all
Okay.
our testing.
Okay.
And so
You just
we've
answered
been-
like 2 of my questions. That's great.
We've been doing this since January with the code that was just recently state certified, including we have done a hand count of the software. So we created a test deck of what ended up being 6,000 ballots. We ran those ballots through the tabulators. We got the results out of Clear Ballot that included the RC tabulation out of RC Tab. And then James actually participated in this. We invited experts from around the country. We invited, City of Portland, Clackamas County, Washington County, like all stakeholders who were interested in seeing how this is done. And I should also mention, this was the first time a hand count at this scale of multi-winner ranked choice voting with single transferable vote was, we believe, ever conducted
This could be a record.
in the United
Yeah.
States. One of our staff persons actually wrote the procedure because no procedure existed to do this hand count. And then that was vetted by lots of national experts. And then we did this hand count in our basement with 6,000 ballots over the course of 5 days.
It was like an election nerd convention.
It was an
very-
election nerd convention, but it was all
Yeah.
to test the software.
Yeah,
Right.
no, it would have been really interesting. Yeah.
And we created a video. We did a press release afterwards, so you can find that.
Find all that.
It's out there because it was
Election
really
nerds all over the world.
it was really important to us that
Don't
we were
worry.
able to say to voters, not only do we do all this rigorous testing prior to each election, but for this big change, we did an even
Right,
larger
right.
rigorous test of hand counting 6,000 city council. We did a mock election
Sure.
basically,
Right,
and we
right,
did it all by hand. The good news is it worked.
Yeah.
The software counted the votes the same way we counted them by hand. And all it took, people think the math is really complicated. It's not. We did it all with standard calculators.
Mhm.
We never had to use even a graphing calculator.
I don't think there was a single math PhD in the room.
No,
I could
it
be
was-
wrong. I don't know everybody's
was-
PhDs, but
It
I don't think there was a
was
single math.
addition, division, subtraction. Is
You just
how
need to know the
do this.
formula, is what you're saying.
And then you have to be comfortable dealing with fractions.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
But fractions are division.
Because of
Yeah.
all the rounds.
Because of, if somebody gets to the surplus, if somebody gets to the threshold, there is a surplus that has to be transferred. It is going to be a fractional. It's going to end up as a math fraction, and then that fraction has to be kept track.
Right.
Mhm, mhm.
But we did this all
Depending on
with,
your ranking.
with paper,
Yeah.
pen, standard calculators.
And it's 6.
and a really
right?
good
That's the
procedure.
fraction. If people rank up to 6, that's where you
I mean, the fraction is dependent on how far over the
How far people
threshold they
go.
were when they got
Okay.
elected.
Yes.
So yeah, so it's set by that because it's yeah.
I feel free to shoot this question down because this could be a whole can of worms, but this will be my last question. Unless you have something else. But one of my candidates that I had on here brought up this thing of state law with recalls, which could impact this system. Which my understanding is if 15% of people, I'm guessing in a district, sign a petition to have a recall for a candidate, that recall election then requires a 50% threshold for a special recall election. But I could have
I'm
no
not-
idea what
not
I'm
sure
talking
that
about.
Math is accurate.
Okay.
So
He described it as a workaround of kind of the 25% threshold. But I
I actually don't think I mean, I do not have a lot of experience with recalls.
Yeah.
yeah.
I will
It's like
say
a
that
completely separate
they just
statute.
don't
And
they just don't happen very
Yeah.
frequently in
super
Multnomah
rare.
County
because you
Yeah.
have
because
to
of,
signature gathering.
because of the
and-
number of signatures
Oh,
that
it's
are
just
required.
onerous. Yeah.
I mean, people might start recall
In my
petitions,
opinion.
but they don't often
No, they don't.
Right.
often
There's not enough signatures. yeah.
Absolutely.
get
not.
enough signatures. Smaller jurisdictions, recalls happen more frequently.
Right.
I would have to do some research, but I'm pretty sure that in order for a recall to be successful, you don't need 50% of the electorate to vote.
Okay.
Just to
In that special election, you don't need that necessarily.
right.
And
And
the
we
city-
have
and-
not
and-
we have not analyzed how the recount statutes would
Right.
align. I think
Oh,
that's important for us to
It also was, yeah, I 100% agree with Tim that that's something it's not talked about often. I know that when we were a year ago when we were talking about the code, it was talked about with the charter and how it would align what we needed to do. It's something I'd want to refresh myself on.
Sure.
But absolutely, and not only that, but when we do talk about electoral district, if we're talking about a city council race, the electoral district is the district of 160,000 people.
Right.
So it's not like because that's not 50% of Portlanders that it's invalid or whatever. So, but again, yeah, I agree with Tim,
It's-
and I'd want to.
It strikes me as something that even if that was true, it just seems like a state law that hasn't caught up to this law, but I don't know.
Also, we also live in a home rule charter state, so there are times
What
where
does that mean?
so that means if we have something in our charter that is set out, we can at times conflict with what is in state
It's
law.
kind of
I
supersedes
think we
that.
should clarify. We are
Not a
not
lawyer.
attorneys.
Right, yes.
Not a lawyer.
This
Yeah.
isn't
not
legal
attorneys.
advice.
Yes.
Right,
And
sure.
and I think it's really important to understand that part of recalls are in the state constitution
Mhm.
Right.
that are not easy to change.
Hmm.
There are some procedural rules that could be changed by state law.
Yeah.
I think neither one of us are expert enough to.
It's okay, yeah.
Sounds
Not a
com-
lawyer.
it sounds
Sorry.
complicated.
It was a
yeah.
very
Yeah.
fringe
Yeah,
question, so
yeah.
but yeah.
But
I mean,
we
there
could-
there's somebody out there who would give, I mean, if push came to shove, would need to give some kind of advisory.
But if you
opinion
could,
to-
if you
about-
email us the question, we could look into it when we have some time.
That's great, yeah. Yeah, well, thank you guys both for coming in. Is there
Thank
anything
you
else you
so
want
much.
to talk about or bring up? I know you got to go, so yeah.
Well, I want to mention there are lots of opportunities for education.
Yeah.
James will say his website. I'm going to say multnomahvotes.gov is the county's website. Lots of information, not just about ranked choice voting, but there's lots of information about ranked choice voting. We have produced a video in both long form and short form in multiple languages. So it's very accessible depending on what people's needs are if they want to educate their friends. We have comics. I actually brought some comics with me that I
Oh,
can
great.
share with you
Great.
that we are
Thank you.
handing out at events. A lot of the tabling events for the summer have come and gone, but there are a few more happening in the community. And then, buses have been wrapped.
Oh,
Movie
you got the bus
ads,
wraps.
yeah.
Movie ads.
Used
If
to
you go to a
Movie
movie,
ads,
if you
okay.
go to a movie, you'll
Wow.
see information about where to find more information about ranked choice voting. We are hitting it hard. We are in that phase where
Yeah.
it is the right time to start talking about ranked choice voting. So I would be shocked if you go through the next 2 months and don't see something.
Yeah, and I'm
out
glad you
in the
talked about the
community.
timing
Yeah.
because I was wondering. I've been like, complaining basically like, where's this campaign? But
Yeah.
the timing makes sense. As somebody who appreciates
Yeah.
comedy, that's a different timing. But it just like that makes sense that you're
Yeah.
waiting till the most optimized time to.
We
That's correct.
we started after the primary. We started, in June with beginning a campaign, but it was always we wanted to be at the major summer events because we know Portlanders love to go out to the street
Yeah.
fairs, things like that. But it had always been we need to ramp up. People in July don't want to figure out how they're going to rank their ballot in
Yeah,
October and November. So it's always been now is more the time we start ramping it up.
But all of the information has been there.
Absolutely. It's always
at
been
those
accessible.
summer events.
Yeah,
If you-
absolutely. Yeah. We've been out there. A lot of people have already heard of us, but we know that, I want to get to 100%. We really want people to have multiple ways that they've heard about it and seen it. So there will be at least 3 citywide things that people will receive. Everybody that votes will receive at the very end of this month on September 30th. A mailer will go out to everybody in the city that will give you some information. There's also going to be some RCV information in the voters pamphlet for all 3 counties that will give you some more instructional information. And there will be an insert in the actual ballot. So if you get to a point where you actually have your ballot and you still are unsure, have concerns, please, like, that insert will tell you where to go. It'll give you some instructions. It'll give you an opportunity to practice again when we talked about our mock election platform. So yeah, portland.gov/vote is our voter education site. It's the best place to go for the city to learn about everything we've talked about here today. Well, maybe not everything. We strayed some about how you
Yeah.
interact and some governance things,
Yeah.
but all the voter education things we talked about today will be covered there,
there.
and
Okay.
it's a great opportunity.
And there will be instructions on the ballot as well.
Yes.
Right.
So not just in the ballot, but on the ballot itself, on the ranked choice voting
It's
page.
literally right next to
That
it.
is in people's envelopes when they get it. And again, voters in the city of Portland should look for 2 ballot pages, whether you're in Washington County, Clackamas County, or Multnomah County. If you're in the city of Portland, you should look for 2 ballot pages in your envelope, vote both of them. Of course, that's not a requirement. You don't have to vote on anything you don't want to, but we encourage you to vote both of them. We also encourage all voters to return both ballot pages. That just helps for the accounting on the back end, but it's okay if they don't. We're not going to throw anybody's ballot out if they don't return both pages. However, if they voted on both pages, return both pages
Yes.
in the same return envelope. So don't send one of the pages to Multnomah County and one of the pages to Clackamas County. Send it back in the envelope you got that will take you to the right place and we'll process it and count it.
Yeah.
All right.
And I also do want to say we do sometimes have people that don't want to get on the internet, don't want to go to a website, don't want to email. 311, we've done some trainings with 311. So if you live in Portland, you can always call 311. If they can't answer the question directly, a lot of these simpler, just how many can you rank, things like that,
Right.
they can answer. But they also have all of our contact information if it's a more complex question. So
They
if you
can
want to get on the
also-
phone.
Yeah, they can also transfer directly
Absolutely.
to both of our
Wow,
offices.
that's amazing.
Yep.
So
Thank
they
you.
can help triage.
Yeah.
Does your question need to go to Multnomah County or
Right.
does it need to go to the city?
Yeah.
of
So if you want to
Kinda
talk to a
route
real
it.
live person, that is an option.
311?
Great. Yeah, I was just gonna say, everyone, brace yourselves because there's gonna be a lot of political ads, but I would suggest looking at these guys' actual info before being bombarded with all these ads and stuff. But yeah, thank you guys so much for coming today.
Yeah,
And
course.
thank you.
Thank you.
Of course, happy to be here.